the brisk walk.
I was gonna say, this one, that's fast along.
We should be ready.
Again,
We should be ready.
okay. Looks like we got everybody here. I want to welcome everybody out to the Roy City Council work session. It's for May 21st, 2024. Time is now looks like it's 6:48. Want to recognize that we have Councilmember Saxton, Councilmember Scadden, Councilmember Sophie Paul, Councilmember Jackson, and Councilmember Joe Paul. Today's conversation needs to be focused specifically on the proposed fiscal year 2025 budget. So there may be lots of other things that we may want to talk about. I ask you to kind of keep those silent and that we focus primarily on this. And council, we're not asking you to make a decision, not this meeting. That decision and meeting will come probably the third Tuesday in June. That's when the required date of the meeting or the decision has to be made. But let this be an opportunity to ask questions, get a lot of information, and then make sure you feel comfortable walking out of this meeting that you have what you need in order for you to make a decision in June. Okay. With that, I'm going to turn time over to Matt. He's going to lead the conversation and then again, channel the conversation in a direction that helps you as you start to ponder our next step. So Matt, please.
Perfect, thank you. So let's kind of break this into two different parts. Is in your packet, you've seen that there was some materials with the mayor. And we're going to speak about that a little later, right? We're going to go through a little bit of a PowerPoint. I don't want to PowerPoint you to death. But back when we presented the tentative budget, there was certain cuts and different things that we talked about. This is an opportunity to get a little bit more into detail about that presentation that night. Your turn. So before we drafted the budget, when the budget numbers were coming in, we seen that there was some deficiencies there. We could see that, as we've talked about many times before, the sales tax started to dip. And so going into this budget, we knew that there was going to be things that were going to be requested that quite frankly, we didn't have the funding for. And so in preparation for that, we knew that we were going to have to make additional cuts just to balance. And so a lot of the new requests, we didn't even add in the first place. And that's one of the first things that we're going to be talking about. I wanted to give the department heads an opportunity, as they were the ones that requested that, to talk about each one of those items. But first, so here's just a basic outline. The first sheet here is something, the next one, that we've seen in the budget. We see it in the budget all the time. This is basically just the expenses of the city in the general fund. Obviously, that's where we typically focus. As you know, there's quite a few different type of funds in the city, but this is always the one that grabs the attention because it's just specifically toward property tax, sales tax. But the bulk of it, you can see the expenses are in the police and fire department of public safety, as they are quite costly to maintain. Going further, I wanted to put these into perspective of revenue offset, because that first point is a little skewed because of the Class C roads and the Transportation Infrastructure Fund, because they get their own funding. Also, this is also important to know that once you start cutting some of these services, they do have a revenue offset. Like the fire department, they're making some money. The police department has a little bit of money in there. The Parks and Recreation, obviously the Aquatic Center has associated money. So when we're talking about cutting operations in the Aquatic Center, saying let's reduce days, there's a revenue offset to those type of cuts. So here's the slide that I was just talking about. These are all the new requests that we received in this year. So this is like added on top of the budget that we didn't even put in the budget in the first place. The first one is Public Works, if Brandon wants to talk a little bit about this.
Just, so we have a janitor one, she's been here for, geez, probably touching the 10 years, and she does a phenomenal job for us. I don't know if you guys are aware, but we have a contract, cleaning contract. And this is our only full-time janitor, which she picks up the slack for everybody, for our cleaning company. And she's really, like you said, she's dependable. She basically sees what needs to be taken care of and takes care of it. So that's why we wanted to reclassify her as a janitor too, because like I said, she requires zero supervision. She just goes and handles and takes care of it.
What is she all clean?
So she touches the complex one. That's probably the majority of her workload, but she touches up here, basically every building that the city has. So up here, Parks and Rec building, she'll jump over there, Public Works admin, complex. Once the complex opens, that's where the majority of her time is spent, but yeah.
No, I'll make sure I understand going into this conversation, Matt. What we're looking at here was the coming in request that never made it into the budget.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and then moving on to my public works inspector. I really wanted to push this job because I feel like it's detrimental to the public works. You guys are obviously aware of all the construction that's going on with the fiber lines. And also just all of the other jobs we have going on throughout the city. It's kind of a full-time job, and I feel like we're lacking in having somebody out there to inspect. I mean, we do the best we can, but if we had a dedicated inspector, I think it would help tremendously. I also think that it would help with our Wasatch Civil, because there's lots of inspections that we have them come out, and I feel like this cost is very minimal to what we would save with, you know, doing away with some of the Wasatch Civil inspections that we could do in-house. So I initially proposed this as a standalone, as a new position, but I understand the budget's tight and I'm willing to work. I mean, we already kind of do it inside, so we would just basically move, reclassify a water guy to this public works inspector.
And the uplift cost would be the 5,000, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's very minimal. It would be, because there would be just a little bit of movement, but yeah, like less than 5,000, I imagine. Not, but. I also had a stormwater leaving too, I don't know.
This is just general fund.
Yeah, this is just show.
Yeah.
A lot of these two, like, there's a big perception versus reality here, and we have to understand that is if we're going into a budget shortfall and cutting a lot of things and then coming out, like this position is not, if you're using a like position, you already have it, you're reclassifying an employee to be paid to be doing what he's doing and just identifying that. I think there's a perception that somebody's gonna get just the promotion out of it. But the reality of it is that somebody's already doing that position. He's just being, right now, it's the water superintendent doing all that. And he's having dual roles, and somebody else is taking on that water superintendent position duties and trying to fulfill those. Or he's trying to do, both, so.
You already have a job description for the PW inspector?
We used to have one probably 10, 15 years ago. Larry Horsepool was actually the public works inspector, but I don't know if it still exists or if
We probably do have it somewhere.
so.
We would have it, just need to update it.
You could probably beg him back as a part-time employee.
But I think to the comment you just made, the top one is actually considered a promotion.
The top one is yes.
So the intent of this promotion is what? We just feel like they're really good employees, so we want to promote them?
Yeah, so, and that's probably my biggest heartache I have is we have the option to do laterals when we bring people in, and I find that real hard when I know, like, for this, I mean, this is technically the only way I can get this person more money is to do some type of promotion. So like I said, I think it's kind of backwards how I can bring in somebody off the street that I don't know for more money, but to be able to promote somebody that does me a good job. and I want to keep around. So that's my frustration, I guess, is I can bring somebody lateral over and pay them more money, but to keep people and retain people, it's so hard to get $2,500.
And how long have they been an employee for you?
She's coming up on 10 years, I believe.
Oh,
So, and you guys can probably pull her pay scale. She's by far the lowest paid employee, full-time employee in the
She's
city.
topped out on her.
She's not topped out, but, and I don't want to dive off course too bad, but that brings up another topic that I also put in for as well, but I don't want to get too far off.
I guess my question would be, Brandon, help me understand. The difference between a janitorial 1 and a janitorial 2 in terms of job performance is what?
So a janitorial 2, when it was established, is basically like a lead role. And like you said, I consider this a lead role just because no, she doesn't really require any supervision. I don't have to have anybody line her out for the day. She basically kind of handles it herself.
So we have a janitorial service that comes here and cleans this building though every night. So she
Yeah.
basically
So
do the.
yeah, so and that's where it gets real dicey because
Yeah.
all these janitorial companies, once you start adding just any type of little extra that they're not quite getting, this cost goes way up. So there's even just like wiping the walls or something. If you want to do that weekly, you know, you're gonna increase your contract by $1,000 a month or so, you know, like just any time. So she basically just picks up the slack that if we was to add it to the cleaning companies thing, then it would raise substantially.
It would be quite a bit more than what you're asking
Yeah.
for.
Who's next?
Okay, so the two full-time bailiffs. So currently, we are operating with 2 part-time bailiffs managing court security. Those 2 bailiffs for the last 2.5, almost 3 years, we have been paying overtime for those 2 bailiffs. We had a person that we had hired on that we were paying a normal rate for. He lasted about 6 months before he sought full-time employment somewhere else. And so we've been paying the overtime rate for these part-time bailiffs. And the idea and the purpose of behind this was to create or move those positions to full-time. And when those officers were not going to be in court, they could be doing other duties related to the court or related to traffic. For instance, they could be out serving warrants. I reached out to the court, and in 2022, there was approximately 1,400 warrants that were issued by the court. Right now, we're only picking up those people on warrants if they reoffend or if they're stopped on a traffic stop. We don't have anybody actively pursuing them. If the average cost of that warrant was $250, you know, that equates to, I think it was $450,000. That could be captured in warrants. I don't know how much of that comes back to the city or to the court, but that's the potential value there. There was 898 warrants that were issued in 2023. And as of today, there's already been 442 warrants issued by the court. Again, no one's actively pursuing those. If you've kind of been watching what's been going on with the Department of Corrections, they're running a caseload specifically in Weber County that's probably higher than any other county in the state. And so just like everybody else, they're understaffed, they're trying to get staff, they're trying to get paid, but they're finding it difficult to manage their probationers and parolees. And if you've seen the annual report I send out, we have 1 probationer or parolee in the city for every 166 residents. That's 241 probationers or parolees in the city. We've got 106 sex offenders that are living in the city. I talked to APMP today. They actually have 14 felony fugitives that are currently absconding that live in Roy. Again, the APMP can't keep up on that caseload, and it's hard for them to proactively go after these folks. And so what I envisioned was allowing our bailiffs to do those duties, but also kind of take care of the traffic problem we're incessantly hearing about. And so when they have downtime, they can be out being visible, they can be doing traffic. traffic citations have plateaued over the last 2 years. And so that's just 2 additional staff that would be out visible in the community. It would be putting probationers and parolees on notice. It would be putting sex offenders on notice. We would be able to build that working relationship with APMP. If we have people that are fugitives, we will have people actively pursuing them, and that message will get out that we're actively doing this, proactively doing this, and we have people assigned to do this. The only other agency that's doing this in Weber County is Ogden City. And they have the ability to pay people to be full-time grant writers and, you know, collect money from the feds to do this kind of stuff. The equipment for the bailiffs, I believe that's just gonna be a one-time cost. We would then just take care of that through uniform allowance and through the annual rotation for firearms, vests, stuff like that. The records clerk, I've been asking for that every year since I was appointed as chief. We have the same number of records clerks now that we have had since 2001. In 2001, we didn't have body cameras. In 2001, we didn't have auto expungements. In 2001, we weren't filling the number of grammar requests that we're filling now with the same number of staff. So if you have 3 officers on scene and they're on scene for an hour, we have an employee that's going to take at a minimum of 3 hours to go through that video footage to fulfill a grammar request, doing redactions, those kinds of things. And so those grammar requests get backed up, the expungements get backed up, audits that we have to go through for BCI, right? They take priority, and so some of these other requests get backed up. We don't have a lead records clerk right now. So when our records manager is out, we have 2 employees that may or may not have the training or may or may not be in a position to take over and do the functions that the records manager can do. And so the goal is to train one of them up to be able to act in her absence. And again, the goal here was if we had the records clerk, we would actually have 2 clerks that would be like our line clerks. Then we would have the lead clerk, and then we would have the records manager. That lead clerk would be able to take on additional duties, thereby allowing the records manager to take care of her audits and to take care of those things as it relates to data entry and Spillman, consolidated dispatch. Right now, she's actually taking on a lot of duties that the line clerks have to do because they're overworked and they've got stuff building up in the queue.
So I have a couple of questions on your 2 full-time bailiffs. Could that be 1 full or 2 part-time bailiffs? Could that be 1 full-time, or is there more work than 1?
So we have to have 2, we have to have 2 in the court.
Okay.
And if they're gonna be out doing, you know, dealing with fugitives, dealing with sex offenders, dealing with people who are absconding, we're not gonna go out in single man cars. So they would literally be doing everything together with the exception of traffic, at which point they could actually separate and be at 2 different places literally at the same time.
My next question is going to come with, I have great respect for you, Chief, but in light of the recent comments about defunding the police department, could we reduce one of our high-paid captain positions and turn that into another patrol position to where we're got people out of the office and out in the public doing patrol and not necessarily doing as much administrative work?
So
And use the additional money to fund the ammunition and training that is being cut from your operations budget.
I can speak to the ammunition and stuff when we actually start talking about the reductions, but I've been looking, and I had this conversation with someone earlier. As far as the captains go, we're large enough now where their responsibilities are certainly delineated, and we have one captain who's responsible for detectives, school resource officers, records, and then we have another captain that's dedicated to training and patrol. To say that we would be actually able to have one captain to take on those responsibilities, I could not in good faith tell you that we should do that.
I respect that. Just thought I'd ask.
That's $70,000. Help me with that one. Does that include benefits?
Yes. Yes, that
So
would,
what are you paying per hour for a clerk? It's 70,000 includes benefit.
the salary would be more around 45 and then 45 to 50, and then you've got retirement and health insurance. Health insurance is about 22,000 a year.
Yeah, okay. Well, my first impression with salary and benefits, 70,000 is too low. But you're telling me you can find somebody and keep somebody at $70,000 a year.
Well, that's our current pay scale starting wage. So whether we can find someone at that is a different discussion.
You can dangle the carrot, yeah.
But everything I'm hearing so far basically says we need to start considering changing those grades. And if we can't give them the 7%, okay, every year, which doesn't seem to be it, then what we consider is janitorial twos or record leads, because every time you put the inspector or the lead or the janitorial two on there, that puts them in a different pay scale. So I'm sensing there's a migration since we already have a PD or a position description for a next higher grade. If we can just get them out of where they are into a higher grade, then in essence, we give them that promotion that helps them become more stable. Irregardless of whether the job actually functionally changed differently or not, we're just trying to get them to a higher pay so we can retain them. That's what I'm sensing. It hits my point about your full-time records clerk at $70,000. How many weeks you expect maybe you hold them? Because to me, you're underpaying them. That's my impression. You may know.
I'm not gonna argue with you on that, Mayor. I agree. I'll be honest with you, the one we just hired, she actually worked here previously. That's how I got to know her. We've been able to fill that slot with her. She enjoys it here. She wanted to come back here. We actually had to proactively go out and encourage her to apply. Typically, we're not finding people that, one, are willing to work here for that wage, or two, they are willing to work here. They're underqualified. They are unable to actually do the work.
That's the reason why I asked my question about benefit, because I would have thought you'd had to pay more, but okay. Any questions, council, about
I mean,
police?
at 45,000, that's about $22 an hour.
Yeah, about the same price they flip hamburgers at,
I haven't seen
And-
public
and-
works.
and-
We're $17.
And
Yeah,
they're
that'd be
looking
good.
at
Yeah,
body
that's better
camera
than
footage at that rate.
Oh, yeah. And what they have to
That
say.
is absolutely violent. And includes death.
I thought that looked like a
So-
really great $70,000. I said to Brandon, wow, that's a lot of money. And so you can tell you make a lot more money than I do.
Fully loaded.
Cause I was thinking that was a lot.
not today.
Yeah.
And benefits.
Yeah.
Council, any questions about police? Going back to the point, I think I want to make it clear, this is what was wanted and was never put into the budget.
Right.
Can I ask a basic question? Was this part of this 7.5% cut you asked everywhere?
No, because it was never included in
It's
the
never
request.
included the original budget. So the 7.5 cut was actually a cut on what was existing.
Stuff that we're traditionally used to, I guess.
And that 7.5%, if I remember correctly, is operational, which is not human capital. It's
Operation off the current year's budget. So what we're at right now, everyone will be 7.5% lower next year. Operational only.
Well, my request was basically following up with the city council who directed me last year to try and get a part-time code enforcement officer. We all have heard ad nauseam. Why we need one, I'm not gonna belabor that. We had that job position open for almost 7 months. We got 2 applicants, neither of which were even feasible to address the job. Had multiple people in the community and in other cities indicate that if it was full-time, that they would be very happy to come over here. The 55,000 is in addition to the part-time money that was there.
Okay, any questions about community development, council? Okay. Steve?
Yeah, I just want to open up first and say, thanks for what we did get. I mean, I know it's a tight year, so we did get stuff. So first of all, thank Evermap for, we did get something. But the first thing is the full-time billing clerk. So currently we have Angie as our part-time clerk who does the QA, that's the quality assurance and quality improvement for our medical reports. that has a direct effect on our collection percentage. I just found out that the national average is around 35%. And we're actually 38 to 40, which is really good. I know that doesn't sound good number wise, but that's actually really good compared with other departments. But the reason why that has a direct effect is it definitely helps increase our revenue percentage. And so the reason why we're deciding to go full time is the call volume has increased immensely. And so where she's part-time with the call volume, she's not being able to keep up on going over those reports, because it is pretty time. I'm not saying it's like going over the cameras, but she has to go over all the medical reports and make sure procedures are done, that the narratives are accurate with what the procedures are. And so it also reflects on the items that are used on an ambulance transport. So she catches all that to make sure and sends it back to the employee. So that really has an effect on the revenue. Another big part, for instance, Talia is on vacation for 2 weeks and we have nobody else to staff the office. We do our best that I can stay in the office. Chief King does what he can to stay in the office, but he has inspections to do. I have a lot of meetings. Today's a perfect example. We try to balance it the best we can, but really it affects customer service. I think everyone in here wants to have a high level of customer service, and that service drops when Talia's not around. When she's and another, her father passed away. There's just certain things that we can't maintain when she's gone. And really we have no one to back her up on her duties. It's my understanding that really there hasn't been anyone, I guess I can go back to 2001, that's really been a help with her on her duties since 2001 either. There really hasn't been anybody. So as we've grown, gotten busier, there's just more needs, there's more demand on her. And we believe that adding a part-time billing clerk can help with the QAQI and also help Talia fulfill her responsibilities when she's gone. And when she's there, there's plenty of work to be done. So a lot of times they're just maintaining what we're doing. I think most of us in our departments like to be more progressive, spend time on trying to make improvements. Those are areas that you can't really work on if you don't have the time. And so as far as the amount, what we did is we took her part-time wage that she's making now. The $26,800 is in addition to what she's making now. So that's what it costs us if we added that full-time clerk. Before I move on to that, are there any questions on her position?
So your plan would be is to take that part-time employee chief and make him a full-time building clerk.
Correct.
Does she want to be full-time?
Yeah, that was one of the first questions. But if and Amber caught this, we actually had a different amount. And she was telling us that, well, her husband works for in the fire department. She wouldn't need the benefits, the FICA, insurance, but Amber did a good job of catching that and make sure we capture if she did quit or.
It was her retirement that I added.
Yeah.
So that's not including health insurance because we know she's not going to.
So
take
that's
it.
not a fully loaded.
Right, that's
Okay.
that specific
That's what we
person.
talked
So if
about.
she happened to leave and we hired someone else, she'd have
Right.
to add another 20,000 onto that.
Okay.
So actually, if you promote her, you make her full-time, it's a bargain.
Correct. Yeah, because we're not having to pay for benefits. Yeah, yeah,
And then so by paying her full-time, hopefully she won't leave, so we don't pay somebody more.
correct.
And this was just trying to reflect what it costs us.
Well, no, seriously, we could tie a pay to performance. And that's the thing is for that particular role, take into consideration, that is one of the very, very, very few like revenue generating positions within a municipality. She can effectively, just by increasing our collection just a couple of percentage points, drastically blow that out of the water. If she was a salesperson, I more tickets. That too, but that's illegal. So anyway, I'll stop there. But that one's like a no-brainer. If people wanted their government to be run like a business, we would fund that one tomorrow.
The two full-time firefighters are increasing overtime. I had Talia run our overtime over the past 5 years and it increasingly is going up. And so the thought process behind this, and I'll try to explain this to you the best way I can. I understand that firefighters were added a few years ago before I got here. One shift was left short. They didn't get that position, and I think two were added to PD. So that leaves one shift open, but the thought process behind this was, and I know we went over this when I did my kind of a firefighter 101. We try to, if we have staffing, full staffing is at 14. Our minimum staffing is at 10, where if we drop below 10, we can't staff an ambulance and we have to do either call out overtime or do a mandatory if people can't come into work. And so as the thought behind this, if our overtime is increasing every year, what's causing that? And it's really hard to put a thumb on it, where this year I've lost 7 firefighters. We brought 70 firefighters in, we had to do up the staffing, so the overtime has gone up, but the thought behind it, and I've talked about this before. We have 14 fully staffed, you should have 2 vacation slots slotted so the employees can take vacation every day. Then you have to potentially look for potentially a sick leave. That takes me down to 11. The other factor to this is, like police, we have tons of training that we're required to do with our firefighters. And there's other things that we have to do for USAR, hazmat. With the new firefighters, you have firefighters that have to go get trained. That now creates people, it's called on-duty training. They leave the department for the day, then they come back, that creates an open slot. The theory behind this, and again, if we fulfill firefighters, and this is trying to be reasonable. I mean, I could say I need more firefighters, but that's not reasonable. If you reasonably say, if we can add some firefighters, and let's say that there's 2 vacation slots or there's on-duty training, those firefighters can fill in and we don't need to call somebody back. We have people there who can fill that in. So that was the theory behind it was, if we could add firefighters, it maybe potentially could reduce the overtime. Or if we don't want to do that, then can we add some to the overtime budget? So as training increases and with new employees, as we're losing them, it costs money to get them trained where we need them to be. Then we'll have to increase some overtime.
You just gotta transport more.
Well, I'm glad you said that. So by adding more firefighters, we've talked about this. We have a 3rd ambulance that doesn't run statistically 196 days of the year. When it's running, now it generates money, not profit, but it generates revenue to help offset the cost of firefighters. And so the more that ambulance could be running, the more it's going to generate revenue to offset the cost. So that's why it's add 2 or increase overtime. There's other possibilities or safer grants. I know PD could do this where you grant the grant for those employees. You have 3 years of those employees, and then obviously the cities have to pick up the bill on those employees. So there's options for it. But that's the reasoning why we were asking for the 2 firefighters with 180,000 increase in overtime. I'm assuming this is getting a lot of questions. Maybe.
Let's move on to the next one.
Okay. All right. Public education team. This is really passionate for me. I come from the oldest public education team in Utah, which is Boots on Bunker in Ogden City. So I believe highly in this, and I've seen direct results being a fire marshal in Ogden and being over the program for over 6 years in Ogden. This was cut a few years ago because of budget restraints by the prior chief, and I believe this is critical in our city as it directly affects over 3,000 kids and educating them on fire prevention. Not just fire prevention, they go and teach a bunch of different stuff. And so we're asking to help pay for the overtime, equipment. It got cut and I've added it to it. And I'm going to find a way to pay for it, but we're hoping that we could get an additional 5,500 to pay for that public education team to be out there amongst our citizens. And you can't ask for a better public relations than having our department in the schools, meeting with the students, the faculty, parents, and they also do the parade. But it does come to a cost to have them have a team.
So where it is public education, are there grants? Cause I know, 6 years ago when I first got on the council, I acquired money to buy new sound equipment for them. I mean, where it is an educational thing, I would think there's some kind of grants out there.
Yeah, there'll be grants for equipment, speakers, trailers that you can use towards it, but this is really speaking to the staffing. Yeah, the overtime that it creates. And we made a pretty good guess what it costs the last few years, and this is the number to pay for the overtime for.
So this is basically going into the elementary school.
Yeah,
It's the clowns.
Yeah.
But they do a great job.
Yeah, as
Because
long as the
like,
schools
you had
allow us.
Assembly like that, Roy High, everyone just hits the parking lot, sends assemblies, they say.
Yeah.
So, but I can see it, the elementaries of it.
Yeah,
definitely
it's
work
K
for them.
through 3 or 4 through 6. But they do other things. They go out and actually do Safe Kids Day, so or in Ogden City, they have Safe Kids Day. There's a lot of things that our clowns go out and do to educate the public, so.
Some of the elementaries do, safety fairs too, and I think you're involved in
Yeah.
that through that program.
And what's really challenging is trying to find people willing to do it, because really, it's a unique ability to be able to go out and teach and get with kids, dress up and act a certain way.
But it's
Um,
your firefighters that do it, right?
Yeah, and they voluntarily do it, but to compensate them, I think it's reasonable to say, if you're gonna go out and teach on your day off and do these things, that we have to compensate you with overtime.
So it's something they do on their day off.
Yeah,
So-
well, yeah, because we either you're doing on duty and you have to get off and someone has to backfill them,
Okay.
or they have to do it, but there's also training, like we used to send clowns down to Texas and Arizona to get the training. And that's the way how you communicate with children, there's always, certain things you shouldn't say. We're always talking with the school district and making sure that we're saying things in the right way, so there's just training that needs to be done with them, so it's not like you just come up with this skit. There's actually some real time spent in the props and training, so.
So this hasn't been done for a while, you're saying?
I just know the prior chief cut the funding for it and I brought it back. That's all I can speak to, because I believe the program. It does a lot of good. I've been on multiple fires where kids' lives were saved because of it.
And you still
So-
have the clown uniforms?
I don't.
You don't?
I don't.
Okay, so that, okay,
Correctly, the cuts were made during COVID
okay.
and then never brought back.
Sure, and to speak to that, obviously the schools kind of allowed the crowds to come in.
Yeah.
We did it, I mean, I don't know what Roy did, when I was in Ogden, we actually had to do an online one. But we're only through the Ogden, Weaver Fire and Roy City. Roy City's been doing probably the second longest in the state. And part of that is because, and it's really weird that Weaver County is so strong in it. As you go down south, in southern Salt Lake City, they don't have programs like this because a lot of times they can't fund them. And so this has been really.
I still remember it back from when I was in elementary school.
Likewise.
Yeah, well, you're a lot younger than me, huh? So I don't remember
I was
that.
born the year you graduated.
Grandkids are afraid of-
Anything else for the chief on these? Okay, thanks, chief. Michelle?
Yeah, thank you. This is a reclassification request from Parks and Recreation to, point earlier, to align the actual job duties that this position is doing with the job description. So this is a request to, enact the recreation supervisor position. This is in line with the other supervisor positions that are in the city and in my department. This position is managing actually two budgets, recreation division and the Roy Days budget, and is also in charge solely of our recreation department. And so specifically with bringing online the complex back up, we will be putting more responsibility on this recreation supervisor. So this is a request to reclassify that person in line with the job duties that they are now being asked to do.
Let me ask a question, Michelle. Is there a position description written on this one already?
Yes, there's
So-
one position.
Your plan then would be is more than likely to consider, I can't say you will, but you will consider that existing employee then will move into and reclassified in a higher position, a higher pay.
The recreation program coordinator position, that would freeze until it comes in the future when we feel like it would be time to open that up and offer more.
And she's been with the city a long time.
8 years, I believe.
Yeah.
She does a great job.
And when I came on, she took on a lot more responsibility. All of the events, all of the recreation programs, youth, adult, and some administrative duties, so.
And so funds available and position approved, why is it on the list? Isn't that an administrative?
Yeah, the position was approved. We've had that position for a long time in the city. It hasn't been approved for quite some time, maybe 5 years now. The funds available, they have some part-time positions that they're never able to fill. And so the idea here was is to take the funding from their part-time budget to move over to full-time budget. But we'd have to get that position not necessarily reclassified, but opened up to say this is the position we're filling and not the other one anymore.
So if they're using funds that they didn't cut, I mean, what does it take to approve that?
Yeah.
Just put it in the budget to say this is the position that we're going to fill this year.
So it would be freezing whatever their current position is. And then however many part-time positions, we chop those out? Why not?
Anything else, Michelle, on this?
I mean, I'm just gonna say it. I support all the departments. One of the problems I have with Parks and Rec is, it's not a bad problem, is their majority of their budget's operational. So when you take 7.5% out of their budget, it's a lot versus a heavy human capital budget, as in some other departments. It's not near as much. So you look at the amounts that were cut and if she's able to fund it out of part-time positions, I'd say do it.
Yeah, I just knowing who she is, I think it's a great.
You can absolutely fund it out of the part-time wages. That's the plan.
Okay, I'm not sure if that's what you want to do. We've everybody's input now.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we understand the total. Setting aside the 12,000 that may or may not basically be part of that. There's a $500,000 cost just to get us through the COLA that we need. That's what the council's facing today in a property tax increase proposed in the budget. If you add this other 500,000, if you include the other one, then the total, because there's only another way to do the total amount of money and of sales and a property tax would be $1 million.
But that doesn't include your 7.5%.
When we get to that, I want to make sure you understand where we're at in this. This is up to $1 million. And we haven't got to the 7.5 operational cut yet, so hopefully that'll come out of this conversation. So we're at $1 million, and the proposed tax increase for property would be right around 10% to 12%, we think, for the 500,000. So considering this, we're now sitting at 22% or 20 to 22%. Is that a fair statement?
Pretty accurate, yes.
Okay, so we'll make sure we get all this synced up. Okay, Matt, go ahead.
Next slide. This is something that you've seen in the budget presentation. We did talk about going through these cuts. This is something that the city is accustomed to. When we talk about these cuts, these aren't one-time things. These are things that next year, unless we come up with the $549,000, they'll remain out of the department. So I wanted to go into a little bit more detail of these cuts because I think it's important that we all understand what this means when we're cutting 7.5% out of our operational budgets. I don't think it's necessary to go through every single line item, but I just want the department directors to take the opportunity to talk holistically of the department, what that 7.5% means, but we did identify it by account. So the first one with the administrative cuts, we did combine the legislative department and the legal department. Mainly, we have in our personnel policy, we have an education assistance program. Basically, we approve that upon available funds, and so there is remaining funds in that level, but as requests come in, we'll only have a limited amount of money to do for education assistance. So that's one of them, and then also travel and training in this department, in the legislative department. I wanted to also talk about there is quite a few things in the legislative department. That's where the council contingency is. I didn't feel comfortable about cutting a lot of those things traditionally held by you guys when you have told me to put that in the legislative department. So if that's something that you want to have a discussion about, we're free to do so. But this is something that was more administrative cuts there. The legal department, mainly with the part-time wages, is just staffing, and then book subscriptions and memberships. It has a lot to do with it has everything to do with a grammar request software that we were wanting to get subscribed to, so. We can go on.
Hey, the next is mine. I cut just little bits from each place. Most of my department I couldn't cut because it's funded by the utility funds, because it's like utility bills, paying for postage, that kind of stuff. So that doesn't help the general fund anyway. The biggest thing on mine was going to be, like in the HR programs, we have a wellness program where we try to do programs for the employees. We try to get everybody together, think about your health. Here's some cool videos to watch. Here's some games we're gonna do. It's not a huge program. We try to do some things for prizes to encourage participation. If they participate, there's a drawing. So that would be the biggest thing cut from my department, would be that wellness program, taking that out so the employees don't have that.
So this one, this is out of the professional and technical budget, and what we're in that, we're paying, Wasatch Civil, and then we're also paying, basically for building inspections that we are not able to do, as you know or don't know. We have a 3-day limit to get those done. So we have contracts with a private firm and then also some agreements to help each other out with some entities, but this would basically come in. And the reason it scares me, I think the total budget was just, I think, over $20,000. So we really, if the building inspector is sick or goes on vacation, we just are very tight in that regard, but I don't, quite frankly, the way the community development budget is, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room. So it's just basically a risk we're gonna take at this point.
So Public Works and my building maintenance, we cut back the overtime. And building maintenance, we had to cut 38,000. We cut it out of equipment and supplies, building grounds, and part-time and overtime and vehicle maintenance. So these are our accounts that we buy Christmas lights, any type of paints, ceiling tile, anything basically obviously related to building maintenance type of things, filters. So we'll just have to cut back on some of that stuff. And then in my shop, we cut 11,000 out. That came out of travel training, equipment, supplies, and books. So in the equipment, we had in there for an oil crusher and an oil pump, so we cut that out. And then we also cut out of my street department. We cut back the part-time wages and then our equipment and supplies as well. That same type of stuff, the stuff that we get our day-to-day operations, whether it's asphalt rakes, shovels, anything along the lines of that, we'll just have to cut back and just make do with what we have.
One thing, if I can say too, on Brandon's building maintenance budget, their current year budget is at like 95% right now for this year. So
And it's real hard to guess just because it fluctuates. So, if an AC condenser goes down, we're talking $5,000. So it's.
he's doing stuff for the whole city. So what I'm saying is they're cutting from this year and they're probably gonna go over this year. By the time we get to June 30th, we'll have a budget amendment to give them, because I think their utilities is over. So a lot of these departments are extremely tight, like Brody said. I don't think he could have cut from anywhere else. It was really, really tight.
So can you still function Public Works with all these cuts and do a good job?
Yeah, and that's the tough part with building maintenance, like she touched on, is there might be an emergency type thing. If this chiller goes down, you're talking $20,000-$30,000, but same thing with condensers. So there'd probably just be budget things.
And they don't
come to you later.
They don't spend it if they don't need it, building.
Yeah, and that's the tough part about these is they all.
So the nice thing at the end of the year, you can kind of balance between. So if somebody else like Rodays was a little bit under, so they're gonna be able to help on the utilities for the buildings, like things can fluctuate a little bit at the end of the year, but most of them are pretty tight.
Yeah, lots of our funding is utilities,
Let me
which
ask you
they are what they are.
You're in a unique situation because you got the enterprises budgets on one side and then is this enterprise funds as well as general funds or all?
This is all general.
all general funds. So if I understand, how much are you cutting? Are you required to cut anything on the enterprise side?
We cut back, just, we met what we're bringing in. We're not spending more than what
So
we're bringing.
virtually nothing on that side.
Yeah.
So everything on, that we're saying here deals primarily on the general fund. Okay. Now, one thing, Matt, would be, Amber, make sure it's clear. How much do you have in reserve funds? Just off the top of your head, round number.
How much? 4 million.
Okay, so the cuts were made, uniforms and equipment. This is stuff that typically the department may furnish for the officers. So, you know, a new hire, we give them a badge, those kinds of things. So that's not a complete cut, that's reduction. Our books and subscription membership. That's a lot of reductions. Travel and training, so the two I really wanted to hit on was the training, travel and training, so that reduction is actually 47%. And these are things that relate to leadership, youth court, the PAC conferences for our records clerks, executive development, the training equipment. We're doing okay with equipment. We're gonna reduce the number of items that we're going through the rotation next year. We're confident we'll be able to get another year out of them. Firearm training, we significantly reduced that budget. We had some available funding this year. We're gonna purchase some ammo this year that should get us through the next year. Problem with ammunition, depending on what's going on globally, we may or may not be able to get it. I know that we've been waiting, you know, nearly a year on certain orders. And so we want to stay ahead of our purchasing because we don't know how likely we are or are not to get it. And if we're not getting it, then we have to reduce the amount of ammunition that we're using while we're training. So our cuts would entirely remove youth court, would entirely remove traffic school, and would virtually eliminate our community relations. So we would not be able to participate in the safety fair, but we would have to continue to fund our PIO specifically as it relates to like critical incidents and public information there.
Okay. Start with the travel and train. I'll kind of hit on a few. This is really challenging for fire departments, again, having a considerable amount of new individuals working for us that are required to have levels of training. And then with the trainings we currently have, there are just a lot of requirements that you have to continue to have recertified. There's USAR, there's hazmat, and all of these are required of us, and then you have to recertify. So this is really challenging. And it's a hard cut when we have so many requirements and then try to keep up with the standards. So that's difficult. Another big one that I really need to speak to is the PPE supplies. I've talked to Matt about this extensively. For some reason, prior chiefs haven't been asking for amounts of money to keep up the cost of our turnouts, and also they're called tech gens. One way we do, to me, is really responsible in trying to maintain budgets. We always have grass fires, we have the train tracks, and we don't have a huge area, but we still have a lot of grass fires. Most departments are using certified wildland gear. That's something that hasn't been purchased through Royce City. So what we do is we buy it's almost like the shell of our turnouts. It's called tech gens, and they're like like I said, they're like the covering of our turnouts. We utilize those for car accidents, are really used for car accidents. One of the reasons you do that, so when you have battery acid, oils, fluids, get on our turnouts, buying a $700 set of tech gens considered to $4,000 turnouts, which could be ruined instantly, is a lot cheaper. And so we utilize the tech gens and for vehicles, wildland grass fires, and then we also have the turnouts. The turnouts have gone up considerably in the last 3 years. Almost doubled in price. They're almost, I think they're $4,200. Boots once were $200, now they're $500. And these are just in your average of the line equipment. There's gloves, hoods, helmets, all of it's gone up. what's challenging about this is in 2021, I believe we had a grant that we got brand new turnouts for everybody. There's a shelf life to turnouts of 8 to 10 years. If you follow the national standards, are 8 years to replace them. Difficult part is when they get a fire, they're required to wash them, get them back in service, but in the meantime, there's a downtime, so we have a backup set. So we're trying to replace turnouts every 5 years, provide them with the backup set, and then there's a rotation. So currently, we have a schedule, and this is something that Craig did a good job at, is every year, there's 9 sets of turnouts that need to be replaced. Right now, that's over $36,000. My line item is actually $20,000. It doesn't come close. So what we're trying to do is reasonably start adding money into the line item. So at some point, we really need an additional 40,000 to start paying for the additional cost of turnouts. So what we're trying to just add incrementally to help offset this, but we really can't, I think, Chief Gruner with the best. You gotta have safety gear. And so this is one way, it's either that, or at some point when all of these expire, we're going to pay an enormous amount of money to replace those. And so there's different ways of looking at it. Maybe the prior chief said, well, we'll just ask for $350,000 up front. We'll try to get grants. Or can we start putting money into this line item and start paying for the PPE and supplies? Because all of those are just drastically going up. The other stuff, they're challenging, obviously the fuel. I mean, that's just, you use the fuel as you use it, but we're gonna try to obviously, try to reduce that the best we can through traveling, the ambulance and all that's part of the transport where we can recover that, but, we'll do the best we can. And then the overtime, we're gonna do our best. I've tried to make some internal adjustments to our overtime. That I've talked extensively with Matt about. We believe making those adjustments will reduce the overtime. This was actually before this came about, but we're trying to do our very best at limiting that overtime. One area when I came in is I've hired, now we have 15 part-timers. We've also done what's called permanent part-time, where they're assigned to shifts, and this drastically reduces our overtime. So we're trying to take every possible avenue to reduce our overtime. We know it's been statistically high, but we believe we really won't know for another year if these changes internally will have a drastic effect on the overtime. But from my experience, it should with our part-time staff, where they're somewhat cheap. I mean that negatively, but we're paying them no insurance, and the benefits is drastically cheaper. And also the internal, how our firefighters get overtime and who gets it. Those are some adjustments we've made. So I believe this cut actually, it's not too bad for us, so we can do it. So I don't think that the other stuff is pretty self-explanatory, but I can't emphasize enough the PPE, how challenging that is to not have the funds to pay for supply or our gear. So.
So this is a dumb question, but you
Never
have
know.
such a large turnover. Obviously, they turn their uniforms and all that in, and can the new person do the same size? Do they wear
No,
those
actually,
clothes?
Great
I mean,
point that I didn't bring up, but I should have.
Yeah.
That's a challenging is every firefighter is required to have it. If you have a small individual compared to large, at North Davis where I came from, we had a firefighter apply that was 6'5", and he had to have these specialty turnouts. That was another additional cost, but you can't not hire somebody because you're tall. They cannot hire somebody because you're small.
I need you between this size and this size.
Yeah,
I
so
need to
that's
check
a
my
great point.
equipment.
Your question, the point they come in as we hire 70 employees, you gotta have turnouts ready where you gotta order brand new ones. So that's the other, in addition, you try to create a guesstimate, a percentage of coverage. So we try to, in this, when I say 40,000 addition to the 20, you're asking for 10% just in case some get damaged and destroyed. You gotta order them. If you have someone walking, you hire them, you gotta buy them. Those are just challenges as you work with PPE. On top of the other ones that we buy for the car accidents and the grass fires and everything else we do.
So when you typically hire a new firefighter, like that, the uniform I see him in every day with the blue pants and the blue top, like how many sets of those do you give them, like 5?
Yeah, when they come in, we've changed that internally. We're the part-timers, where they're working for us, we give a pair of boots. But what we've decided to do is we're gonna wait till they work 6 months, so we get a return. Sometimes you can see a part-time employee, I get new boots and they're wearing their full-time department. So we've changed that where you gotta work for 6 months before we're gonna give you a pair of boots. Full-timers, we're giving some t-shirts, we give them some uniforms, the badges, like for $160 for a badge, we're down like 8 of them because we ran out of money. but they gotta have a badge, so it's just challenging. And so we're trying to, but we don't give them a lot. We give them a few shirts when they need them. Other than that, there's a clothing allowance that the city has, and we ask them to use their clothing allowance and spend it wisely. So, and that hasn't increased. I mean, that, we could tell you that uniforms go up. Nomex pants and shirts, and I've had to change the policy because it required them to buy Nomex pants. They're $180 for pants, and then $160 for the shirt.
Jeez.
On top of that, so you got over $300, I mean, he knows it, the police knows this. So I changed the policy to wear a dark navy blue pants, so they don't have to buy it, because if our clothing allowance is not going up compared with the price of the uniform, we have to make internal changes, which we did, so.
No shorts.
So we do our best to obviously look professional at all times. And another good thing we did when we went to t-shirts, and we're not requiring them to wear Class B uniforms. So you don't have to, as an Ogden, they're required to have it, so I had to have wear one every day, so that's fine. At $160 a pop in pants, so by going to t-shirts, that helps. Where we're going to t-shirts, I still think they look very professional in t-shirts.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So.
Hey, Michelle?
This list looks very long. Please remember that we have 5 separate budgets in Parks and Rec Division, so I'll speak briefly to each one. First of all, we kind of took the same approach that some of the other departments did. We cut travel and training. We left funds in those to cover essential certifications, but other than that, we don't anticipate sending anybody to any trainings with this next year. The complex, the implications on the complex, we removed some funds that were allocated to weight room equipment rotation, some funds that were allocated to program supplies, such as water aerobics equipment, other yoga mats, things like that, the programs that they run. And then a reduction in the community outreach that they do. So they do some specialty programs with some holidays over March, forgetting what that holiday is. But so they do a couple specialty holiday programs, and we would just anticipate removing those. The aquatic center, this one was a little bit more difficult. The aquatic center is similar to building maintenance, where they kind of operate all operations. So we anticipate this to take effect in the deck furniture replacement. As things break, they may just not get replaced, so you may see a reduction, things like that. We took some funds out of the building and grounds maintenance. That would be items as preventative maintenance that normally we would do. We may be taking a reduction in there. And then a reduction in the cost of goods sold. That's the concession items. Roy Day's budget, we removed the BMX competition, which actually we were already planning on doing. So we took the funds out from that. And then we may see some decreases in regards to the any paid marketing that we may do, some event signage and some of the celebration activities, a reduction in some things like parade candy or something like that to help absorb some of these cost reductions. As far as Parks and Rec is concerned, again, the travel and training for those 2 divisions. We removed out the tree replacement program, unfortunately. And then we reduced funds in the community outreach specialty programs. Again, this would be something like where you would see an impact in maybe the Easter egg hunt or the trick or treat Roy City. Those may look different without any city funds allocated to help them out. And then parks, we reduced their grounds maintenance budget, and we anticipate this to possibly affect our 3rd fertilizer application.
Is that the very bottom one that's covered with the talking where you said the $20,000 one?
That's the tree replacement.
That's okay.
We had asked for additional money in response to the strategic plan for tree replacement, so we removed that plus.
So does that mean like all the dead trees that you marked at parks won't be replaced? Are they at least gonna pull them out?
I'm gonna try.
So have you ever thought about, I don't know, maybe you've done this before. We have so many nurseries around here, like, would they ever donate trees to our city if we asked them, like, especially at the end of the season, some that haven't been sold or whatever?
And then can we tag them and say tree donated by? I don't know, I'm just thinking of one.
I can actually speak to this from prior to Michelle's here. And I talked to just about every nursery in Davis, Weaver County. And the short answer was no, and if they were donated, they're quite frankly trees we didn't want to put in the park.
Okay. But.
Or we're gonna die anyway.
Well, not that they were bad, but they were just types of trees
Trees
that
that you wouldn't find in a park.
well,
Well, and the
Right there.
parks require special trees. You know how hard people are on the parks and you can't put just a, you know, a 1 inch, 2 inch
Right.
diameter
Yeah,
tree in the
it's-
park that somebody would
That's
just
right.
kick that right over. And
a
so,
lot of it was the types too. Like,
Yeah.
you can't put a tree that's gonna be really dirty in the parking lot, right? You have to have certain types.
So if we have like money in our beautification, money that we haven't used for a really long time. And there's like a specific really nice area in the city that needs a tree, we could use the money to maybe plant a tree here or there from our beautification.
What about another thing? We used to take donations for park benches. What about buy a tree?
so the city does have an adopt a bench, adopt a tree and adopt a trail. Those are all suspended right now while we reevaluate them. Obviously, the prices of trees and benches,
Yeah,
all of that has gone up and the costs that were out there for that program don't come close to
Yeah.
covering what it actually costs the city
I was just
to
curious
do
because
that installation.
I would consider donating money for a tree.
Sure, yeah,
I
and it's on our list to reevaluate.
I hate seeing you cut the fertilizer. I mean, my granddaughter plays parks all over everywhere. And we always comment on how some of them are so much nicer, the grass. And I just think if you're playing on real nice soft grass and you fall down, it sure don't hurt as bad as if you're on like rock solid grass. And then could they sue the city because it's not a good, you know, safe place to play on if they got injured or because you know,
It depends.
it depends.
They can have to sue for anything.
These real safety concerns, those would be big holes and divots and stuff, and we will absolutely take care of that kind of stuff.
I just love the way our, you know, especially our building out here, how nice it looks, because I can tell it's been fertilized, it's been watered, and it's the best it's looked in a long time. I just hate for us to have to not fertilize the grass.
That's why we're here.
Or spray for the official flower of Roy City, the dandelion.
It's like, we haven't, okay.
Okay.
Michelle, you got any more?
That kind of sums it up. Do you have any questions?
$180,000.
Probably enough.
cut. Okay, next. Mark, Cassine?
I can speak to that. Really, the first one is the bulk of it. We have body cam footage that we house inside Roy City, just downstairs in with our own hardware. The new body cams are all cloud-based. There's a migration cost if we want to move everything internal to external, and then it's unlimited, but you have to pay to get it out of Roy City to their unit. So right now, it's there, it's not supported, so it's just there on hard drives. It has retention, they've gone through that. We were hoping that a lot of it would go away because of the retention policy, but we have to keep a lot more. I think there's like 53 terabytes or something like that on our computer system here. So that was the migration to do that. And then just professional technical, that's when IT needs additional resources outside of Roy City. So,
And what is that, those hard drives, what does that have on it from what
body
department?
cam footage.
Dealing with the
Just so
scans.
the police can. Okay.
So that's really
So
the summary of
what
the
was that,
cost.
did you have a number on all that? How much all, I mean,
57.
I didn't have it all.
It goes up to the very top right there.
Thank you. So it's 549,150. That is the 7.5% cut that you asked everybody to cut. Okay?
This next slide was talking about just roughly what a property tax would be. Oftentimes, we always look at what the property tax rate percentage would be. We do not know that. We talked a little bit about that. When we presented the budget, we should know that by June 10th. But this is to put it in perspective about what it would cost per household. We have roughly 11,043 households in Roy. So if you take 500,000 divided by that, that's $45 a year. And then 1.2, we can all do the math to say where that property tax and how much that would cost the average resident.
500,000, Matt, is, as it sits right now, only takes care of the COLA.
Correct. So there's basically multiple components to this is money that we did not add, 500,000, money that we cut out, a little over 500,000, and a COLA for city employees is a little under 500,000.
So 1.5 is what you're short. My math serves me correctly.
If we got there.
Well, that's funding everything with no cash, right?
That's fun. That's the ass
Ask
plus
plus
the cut
plus
plus
COLA.
COLA.
Is what
1.5 million,
yes.
1.54.
so more than, so closer to.
Okay.
100.
Something that this doesn't
48.
address is that when departments came in to ask for funding, like let's just say, for instance, the fire department with PPE, they asked for an additional PPE funding. There's an additional $200,000 on top of that we took those additional requests out of operations before we even cut the 7.5 as well.
I have
I
one
know
other
that's
question.
pretty hard to follow.
One other question. The approximately 4 million in the rainy day fund, what percentage is that?
It's hard to say right now at this point of time. I would guess it's probably around 15.
15. I thought we said a requirement at 18,
We did, and we dropped below that.
so we're now below
So
our 18%.
at the year end, because you got to think of what that percentage is based off of. Was based off of revenue. So it's percentage of revenue that you receive. So at the end of the year during our audit process, we were roughly around 40 or 23%. We then took the money out for the complex on top of that, and it dropped that threshold down to around 15. But you have to back into that number later because you have to understand where the revenue, because it's a percentage of revenue. So as revenue drops, if you have funding, your percent actually increases. If your revenue keeps on continuing to go up, you would take more money to equal a higher fund balance reserve percentage.
And you can't calculate it during the year because the revenues are so much on a lag compared to the expenses. So the only time I can give it to you is in like October, unfortunately, for the prior year.
So.
But I would
So
guess
how do
between
you,
15 to 17.
How do you calculate that into the conversation? It's almost like you can't.
We try to keep it at the same, approximate same balance each year, and that way you know approximately where you're at.
So
If you don't have big fluctuations,
You know what it was last year?
It ended about 23%.
22, 23.
28 million.
But that's before we took the 950K out for the complex.
Yeah. And that's not including the money that we have over in like the capital projects fund as well.
Yeah, and we move those interchangeably to make sure we keep that 23% or about where that needs to be.
Yep, so it's kind
I
of a
think the law
guessing game.
says what, of the 32 max?
You have to be
35.
between 5 and 35. I don't recommend ever getting close to the 5.
Okay, Matt.
So the next part of this was the other $500,000 for the COLAs. The 3% COLA for the employees is about that much money. This is a slide that you've seen in your budget presentation last council meeting, as well as other benefits that the city offers. This is a comparison that you also seen in the budget presentation of where that 3% was given or was basically determined from. We've also looked at other cities. There's a city survey that goes around. 3% was kind of a happy medium. There's obviously people doing a lot more, and there's some people that's doing less, so. This is another slide. throughout the year, we talked about the 24 full-time staff that left. Chief has talked about the 7 that's left the fire department. We'd identified other positions within the city, particularly in public works, that we have a very high turnover ratio. This is a snapshot of where Royce City is paying with just neighboring jurisdictions. We did talk about in our last city council meeting about maybe doing a comprehensive review of employee turnover and an exit review or something like that, an exit interview with employees. But I also wanted to point out that when an employee leaves for another job, each director can tell me where they're going, what they're getting paid, because typically they're very, very open to directors, to myself. So it's really no secret. Oftentimes Public Works, they're fighting against obviously other cities, they're fighting against Hillfield, they're fighting against private enterprise. And then with public safety, they're obviously fighting against other cities that are doing the wage war with that, constantly trying to increase things. But the 16% turnover ratio is obviously something that we're not proud of and that we don't like to see. But when we're talking about just a quick snapshot, couple of minutes to say where are we at in comparison to other cities, that's kind of one of the issues. One of the other problems is just like in the operator 1 position, we typically start those employees at the very bottom. I would say always start the employees at the very bottom. They usually come in with a little bit more experience, but the problem is that when you have a 3-year employee and you're having somebody come in and doing a lateral 3 years, they're making more money, and that 3-year employee is teaching them how to do their job. And that causes, we don't want to hurt the employees we currently have to bring somebody new in. Another problem that we've been having in the water department is when we're looking at what these merits mean to the water department at 2% for the first couple of years, that's roughly about $700 a year. So when you're talking $17 an hour, my outlook in 5 years, I'm going to get, roughly $4,000 increase. And so they're looking even long-term, the rate of return of staying here doesn't equate to some of these other jobs on the outside. So that's something that we really have to address. That's something also in the strategic plan that we want to be talking about as well.
Idea roughly where police fall into that?
No, not as a wage survey. We could obviously do that. The next slide does have another city's pay scale that you did see in the last city council meeting, but I wanted to pull this up for a couple of reasons. If you look up top there, the top of it has a 4% COLA. And so if they're doing a 4% COLA, they're saying they're doing a 4% COLA every single year. If we're doing a 3% COLA, that's 1% behind that we get. Or let's say they have in between their pay scales, they have 5% in between their pay scales. The public safety sector currently has a 3.75. So when they're doing a 9, we're going to do a 6.75. So this is something that cities are very, very open about. Public safety does like to see where they're going to be because they want to see what they're going to be retiring at as well. So they're looking at this pay scale and saying, well, if I stick it out for 11 years, this is what my expectation is. So this is one of the challenges that we do have as well. And this is for obviously everybody. We all have pay scales, police, fire, public works. That's one of the things with transparency. One of the other issues is you can go online and just look at Transparent Utah. I've had a lot of feedback from employees that, X employee left to go to X city. And I look now and I had more experience here and he makes X number of dollars more than I do. So
Transparent Utah is kind of convoluted because it's hard to break out what's truly benefits and what's truly wages.
You have to understand what
You
you're
have to
looking at
understand
there.
that.
That is absolutely correct. So.
Well, let me see if I just understood everything you just said, man. It's at 5.2, 5.3%. You're gonna do a 2.5 and a 3% COLA. So you're automatically at 5.5. We did a 4% health benefit increase. So even with almost every year providing a COLA and a merit increase and more than likely a health benefit increase, it's still not enough.
we still trend a little bit behind because you have cities that continue to do more and more and more. Because
Those are
they're,
richer cities though than us.
they are.
mostly.
What's
Absolutely.
Cross isn't?
Right.
Yeah, what's process?
I grew up in What's Cross. Bountiful.
Well, they
And
have-
some of them
we're
are,
not
you
sure
know, that's who
why.
we're competing with.
That's some of those.
But
big
the reason,
prices and they get-
the reason why I really wanted to identify this is because it's important to say, well, we just did this big comprehensive wage study. Why are we falling behind? Because I get that a lot. And this is why we're falling behind. Is because when other cities are doing more, you can take on average, you know, the median of where everybody's at, and that's how we do it. We pick, you know, so many cities and then we get 50 percentile. But if those cities continue to do more, we continue to drop down, or, you know, there's other cities that aren't doing as much as we are, and they're even going back further than we are. So
So what's the answer?
the answer is that we're going through this every year, and I'm identifying the problem. The answer really comes down to is if we want to retain the employees, there's only so much we can do internally to provide that good workforce, because ultimately speaking, we're looking at this wage and that every time they leave, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about that wage. So unless we can pay that wage, it's always going to be an issue.
Well, okay. We certainly look at the wage of beginners, how we do in terms of the seniors.
So that's kind of going back to that pay scale. If you look,
Seen it.
back up. They usually do about a 45 to a 55% spread. And so given the fact that so public safety has a 12-year program, just like those guys do. And so that's a 55% spread there, I believe. In the public employee side, there's an 18-year program with a 55% spread. So a lot of cities are common in that whole pay ratio to a 45 to a 55% spread. So I would say we would be pretty equivalent to other cities where they're at.
So we're stable at the top.
But once you get to the top, I would say that's where, you know, if the bottom increases, your top increases as well, right?
See, that becomes part of the problem, you know, to put a 10% increase at the bottom wage to get it profitable is easier to swallow than to take that same percentage and put it at the top end, because the cost at the top end is more. So, I mean, arguably you can say, and I know you're collapsing, you're putting those pay rate compression too close together. But we seem to do okay at the top, but not so much okay at the bottom, because we can't retain them and keep them at the bottom. So is the issue, we should be basically not giving as much to the top, and therefore basically putting more of that wage, available money at the bottom, so we can retain the people we got coming in?
I think there's a really good argument for that when you talk about other cities that has traditionally done that, including Royce City. What has been the problem is that humongo tax increase that they did, they had a lot of compression in the city. Where they talked about if you just increase the bottom of the pay scale, then you have all that middle line staff that gets upset because they're not getting that increase and they put in the time. So that's when they start looking. That middle line staff is also a place that we're really missing. We have a lot of the upper end and we have a lot of a tremendous amount of the very low end staff. But really, when you're talking about morale and different things, that's the counter argument to that. I know that talking to Chief Williams, that's something that Ogden City did, and that's something that people were leaving because of it. The harsh reality is that I get it that one of the police departments hire a sergeant. They usually don't go external, they usually go internal. But there's obviously different things into retirement, different things that some of these employees can say, well, you know what, if this is not right for me, then I'll just leave public service and retire out and do these different things. But I get your point.
What I was just indicating is a person's got 18 years in, they're certainly not going to change a career with 18 years in when they can retire in 5. I mean, they possibly, if there's a significant emotional event, but for the most part, a person's topping out at $160,000, $180,000 a year. pretty well bet that's probably a good wage to retire out as, and they're gonna stay the course until they get
I
there.
think, you know, if they do meet that, I think they do usually stick around, that's right.
Yeah, but people down here at the bottom, what you're indicating are just leaving. I'll tell you, okay, it is what it is. I've always thought there's a better way, but it can't happen locally. It's gotta be the state legislators gotta take this issue on. I share that with you because a GS-12 working in Salt Lake City under the federal system is paid the exact same amount of money as a GS-12 working in Coahuila or St. George. That pay is set wherever that job is. That makes no difference, and the pay is set. So moving from one job to migrating to another one because they can get 50% or 7 cents or whatever it is, doesn't make any sense and doesn't normally happen the way the federal government has got it set. It's the local government competing against each other that's creating this challenge because we're just feeding on ourselves. And as it was stated by one of the chiefs at one time, that simply says, we used to be just simply a recruiter. We'd bring them in, give them about 3 months. We couldn't pay them enough. They went somewhere else after we trained them up. Can't do that either, which is why it's so important we find a solution at the bottom end of this scale and then figure out how we can make it fair for the top end. My concern right now is that from everything I just heard, we're not able to keep our people, even though we're giving them a 7, 6, 7, 10% increase every year. Because somebody else is giving them 11 or 12 or 13.
I chime in here. I don't want to speak out of time. So I know in Public Works, the big thing we're up against is we're on an 18-step program. And to me, it's backwards where the first couple of years they get smaller raises. My guys are they're probably bringing home $20 more paycheck after 1 year of working here. A $700 raise. So I would like to see us be on the 12-step as well, because that's, I mean, I think it takes all of us to run a city. And that's what I hear from my guys is why are they getting bigger raises than us?
That kind of plays into what the mayor said, that you ought to, and at my work, it's that way. Your first few years, your raises are bigger to get you up.
Yeah, because once
We
you
have a
get in
midpoint,
15,
so
then it's
the
easy
goal is to
sustain.
get you to the midpoint, and then your raises are lower to kind of keep you at the midpoint.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's been explained, but it makes me cringe to think about the water department. That's who supplies your clean drinking water. The ones that come fix your water line in the wee hours of the morning. I have a guy that's got 29 years, a guy that's got 26 years. They both can leave at any time. The one's of age, the other one's close to retiring 30. And my next employee's got less than 5 years. So
And never
20
been
years of
500 a
inexperience.
year.
Water don't taste so good anymore.
That's,
Keep my bottle of
So-
water.
Well, I don't know how they can start out $17 an hour. They must live at home with their parents or not married. Because how could you even pay rent?
well, no, and that's like the mayor bringing up 70,000. Mine's 60,000.
Yeah.
But we started people out with benefits, 35,000 a year.
I haven't made less than $17 an hour since 2001.
Go back to flipping burgers.
Another thing I wanted to mention was, you mentioned the 4% increase on health insurance. The employees also have that 4% increase in health insurance. They're paying more for their health insurance than they were last year. And, well, not all of it. The city takes 4%, the employees take 4%. We both have the same. The other thing is Utah Retirement Systems is now requiring tier 2 employees to contribute to their pension retirement. So they have between 0.7 and 4% coming out of their checks, which for like police and fire, that's 2% over last year. So you have a 4% increase on health insurance, a 2.5% increase on retirement that they're paying out of their checks. So even giving them a 3% COLA, they don't necessarily bring home more pay in their paycheck. We're just trying to keep them even.
But under URS, everybody plays that same game, right?
Yes.
Regardless of what city or county.
Yes. But if
Some
we
cities
don't,
pick
if we
it
don't
up, though.
provide the COLAs and keep up with that, the employees fall further behind. They're bringing home less money in their paycheck than they were the previous year.
They can't do that, but you can pick up more of the healthcare. I mean, we were having a problem down at the sewer district. you'd get somebody operator certified and they'd even go to one of the other sewer districts. And the only way we could do it is, we pay for 100% of the employee health insurance at the sewer district.
We've done that with health, and that's what we're looking for. What other ways can we increase their job satisfaction besides just pay? And we have done a great job with our health insurance programs, because we do have a free option now with the health savings account. So some employees, if they're willing to go that route, their health insurance is free. The city picks up 100% of it.
Are we contributing anything into their HSA savings? How much?
I don't know a percent. I have dollars for.
Yeah, I mean, case in point, like, never in a million years with all of my son's health issues would I have ever done like a high deductible health plan until I went to work for my current employer, because they basically pay me $2,400 a year to sign up for the HSA. And my max out of pocket for an individual person on my policy is $3,000. So I'm technically only coming out of pocket $600 if I have a catastrophic event with them
We put approximately 1,200 in for a family,
for a family.
which is great.
That's fantastic. Yeah, $100 a month. Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to get, a few more benefits like that.
Yeah.
To help.
So what can we do to change Public Works so they're get paid more and at a 12 step instead of, I mean, how do you go about doing that?
Well, the first thing is
So we
that
can
Matt
keep
would have
people-
to run the numbers. We'd have to see what the impact's going to be. Can't be just Public Works. It's also got to be Parks and Rec and admin. If you're gonna do it for one, you do it for all.
Yeah,
And then you look at the impact, you look at the cost, and guess who gets to approve that?
Yeah.
You. And if an action out of this, which is what Matt and I talked about before, as we were framing the 5-year strategic strategy plan, Matt has an action to find ways to retain employees. That's a big challenge.
yeah.
And to some extent, we've got to find ways to do that. But along that line, since we did talk about overtime, chiefs, this would be an easy answer you can provide me. We have to provide coverage 24/7. When we have a holiday, does the person who's working get paid for that holiday? That's holiday pay.
It's calculated in already.
The fire department receives extra vacation leave to compensate for those holidays. So they work the same shift works, but they get extra holidays to or extra vacation days to compensate for the holidays.
So basically give them like a floating holiday is what it
Yeah.
equates out to.
Yes, so when they use that, they would fill that with part-time.
So they're not getting double paid. They're not getting.
Not on the same day, no.
Okay.
Well, it gets more complicated if that's how it's happening, because you already indicated one of the challenge, and I suspect both of you found yourself in this. Is you have some difficulties in your ability to basically give the people the time off that you can take to have that.
So having extra days in your,
So what does it make?
Yeah,
any
what does it make a
difference if you're not getting
difference? Yeah.
compensated, or if you're working them overtime, okay, and they don't have time to get the training and all the work that has to be done, and also take their time off. That would frustrate me, because the people need the time off to be healthy, and we may not have the people we may not be able to provide them that opportunity, because you have to provide 24/7. It was a general comment. Thanks for answering. My intent would be is that I just know every time state or federal makes another holiday, then it can and has for me in the past complicated the problem.
perpetuates the problem.
Yeah.
So now that we know all the problems, what's our solutions?
Well, we're getting there. Go ahead, Chief.
I just don't want to be here till midnight.
Can I just add on to that? So the other problem we're running into is not only we provide 24/7 coverage, right? All of our detectives got called out on a pretty egregious child abuse case right before city council meeting. So instead of going home, we've got 5 or 6 detectives out doing search warrants. Some are at the hospital, some are at the Children's Justice Center, some are at their house, some are here doing interviews. So our entire detective division is out, right? And so for every hour they're on this case, they're burning 6 hours of overtime. When they come back to work tomorrow, if they're not getting paid the overtime, right? What's happening to their caseload that's sitting on their desk? So then their queues start stacking up and it just snowballs.
This is an interesting issue. We obviously employee retention, Matt, is a critical requirement. And at some point in time, we just got to figure this thing out and present it to the council. to Ann's point, in terms of changing the steps from what it currently is 18 to a 12, that needs to basically be flushed. And certainly if an action of the council is such to flush that out and look at it from all sides and then bring it back, we just need a simple direction from you to do that.
Well, I'm good to do it, but I mean, where's the turnip that we're gonna squeeze the money out of? Cause my money tree's broken, so.
No,
I mean, and I'm all for, I'm 100% for taking care of employees. We have to. Cause this is my belief. I can't have a happy resident if I don't have a happy employee. Cause when that resident calls with a complaint, I'm not gonna grab the shovel to fix their water line. I'm not gonna go patch the hole in front of the road. I'm not gonna get their sewer flowing again. I gotta have good people doing it. I gotta have people transporting, taking care of medical, everything. I want my parks to look good so I can walk and so do all the residents. So there's, everything keeps going up for the city to run, but our income's not going up.
Well, then we used to have to raise taxes every year. Everybody that I've talked to
Yeah.
this whole week, residents and former.
We have a few other
members.
solutions, but yeah, taxes is one of them.
Taxes, yeah.
Gonna have to be tax increase every year, to stay up with inflation.
Yeah, we'll have that conversation. Matt, anything else you want to share?
There is one more slide, I believe. Now, I don't know if you can really see it. There's a highlighted road on there. That's 3,500 west. 3,500 west is about 1.65 miles long. And that represents about 1.65 miles of water line along that roadway. There's 157 miles of water line throughout the city. So in the budget, we talked about doing a $10 per month increase to the water utility fund. And I know that is very hard to swallow. It's a lot of money. That's $120 a year. I'll do the math. But I want to put a little bit of perspective here. For that, if we were to raise the $10 to replace that water line, it would take us 3 years to pay for that 1.65 miles of water line. If we were going on that same ratio to replace all the water lines in the city, it would take us 285 years to replace those water
All
lines.
the ashes or dust.
But with that being said, if we wanted a debt on the back end of that project and say, well, we'll wait until then and then raise rates to rebond because we have a bond going away in about 2027. You usually do about a 15-year bond. If we did that, it would take about 1,400 years to change the water lines in the city. And that's given the fact that no water lines would increase in cost.
Scorched earth by then.
These water lines, keep in mind, they have about a 50-year life.
And how many have been replaced in the city already?
Oh, tons. A lot of our focus was changing some of the bad water lines that we had. Replacing the asbestos lines, replacing the 2-inch lines because of the fire department and their regulations of trying to get water to suppress
A
fire.
lot of them. I mean, you've got pipe that aren't 50 years old that bells are going out. I mean, there was a couple
And-
on my road that the bells started leaking.
Yeah.
They gotta tear the road up and put this great big monstrous clamp over the top of the bell and
Yeah, the acidic acid down there below 35 is really bad.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is prior to like all the inflationary things that have hit the market, the last number I heard, we were on a 10-year horizon looking at like 100 million. And I think that's inched up to like 125 million in infrastructure that we're going to have to replace over the next 10 years. And in doing this, I guess, what are you proposing? Are you saying keep that $10 on?
What I'm saying is that $10 is hard to swallow. But you look at the offside of this and just to say that in the budget, it's only recommended to do this for 3 years. The reality is that it's going to have to go far beyond that.
So that's
it's-
$5 per bill.
$10.
$10 per bill.
You said per month though, and I get billed twice.
You got two properties?
Uh-oh.
No, I mean.
I think you need to talk to Nikki.
Oh, yeah, once a month. It used to be $40-something, now it's
Every other
$80-something. Oh, yeah, it used to be every other month. That's what I'm
Yes.
speaking of.
Yes.
So now it's gonna be $90-something a month instead of 80-something.
Well, that includes all your bills. That's not just
So-
your water.
Yeah, that's.
So currently in the
pretty cheap.
water fund budget, they have $1 million in capital to spend every year to replace water lines in the city. That highlighted yellow is costing us $5 million. And we're only doing $1 million every year.
You get federal money?
Like
to
it-
Grants or?
the-
anything?
The cost that the water lines have gone up, I mean, everybody knows inflation's hit us hard, but
Right.
water has been ridiculous. Getting the, for that has just been astronomical.
I think when you have the federal government shoves so much money into water infrastructure and it's really inflated the cost. When we were originally doing 5600 South, I think the estimates were like $2.5 to $3 million and we're paying 4.8 for 5600 South to be replaced. So the inflationary factor has just been incredible in that market.
Well, we just bonded at the sewer district for $18 million just to keep our revenue on projection for, I can't remember how many years,
What was
but
the
it's
bond
not near as far as it was a revenue bond.
Well, yeah, it's
The good news is, yes, you can put in for federal grants. We have put in it for federal grants. They are taking that onto the committee. And so hopefully there is good news to come out of that. That's obviously not approved, but
But
yes.
the
that
devil's
is-
advocate to that is you reduce one major admin position in Public Works and Brandon's running around kicking butt, taking names and doesn't have time to do grants. So
Devil's advocate too, there's a sewer line. in there too. It's-
Yeah. I mean, especially in my neighborhood, you know, that was coming.
Well, Matt, I
You can't
think,
drink water. you
I think the
not
council's,
Mayberry anymore,
Yeah.
folks.
the council basically has received a lot of good insight on this. And I think bringing the department heads to explain some of this helps. Council, let me just flush out what we see at this moment, so there's no confusion. I'm just extrapolating the numbers as I see it. Right now, there's about 1.5 million of requests and everything else, just to get everybody, you've heard, whole for where they were. 1.5 million. The budget you have in front of you is approval for 500,000, and the 500,000 will bring only the SA needs to basically meet the COLA requirement. And in that case, the property tax increases being proposed would be roughly a $45. Amber will say we're not sure yet, and we won't know until June, but we're estimating about $45 a year increase in property tax per household. That will fluctuate obviously based on the value of the house, but assuming $45, roughly 10 to 12%. With everything you just heard and everything that's been extracted, it's not 500, it's 1.5 million. And so if you look at 1.5 million, then the property tax increase is going to get closer to 30 to 35% if you wanted to get everything you heard today paid for. Then we're going to add on top of that, okay, and by the way, that'll be $120 a month, okay? A year, excuse me, property tax. Then we're gonna add on top of that, $120 in terms of water bill. In order for them to pay for what we need is the $5 million by the 2026-27 year, so that we have the money to replace the water pipes on 3500 when UDOT cracks the road open and provides that support.
Unless we get a grant.
Yeah, and right now, as Matt suggested, the grant request went in. Kevin ain't gonna like that, but bottom line is that it's in. We're waiting for the committee in Congress to decide whether or not that's something we can do. What I'm trying to put in front of you is the numbers. So you can kind of decide, here is what you have today. Here's what you have the potential tomorrow. And somewhere in the middle of that, or all of that, one way or another, is what you've got to come into the meeting, the third Tuesday in June with a decision. All that can be fleshed out for you. The way I see it at this moment, okay, $120 plus $42, $45, we're talking about $160 per year increase, okay, to the average resident. Or we're looking at possibly, it could go as high as, well, conservatively, it'll be somewhere right around $240 or $250 a month, or $250 a year. So anywhere from 100, basically 160 to 240 is your target. Some of the things that I think you heard, you'll probably say, I think they can live with that. Other things you heard today, you're probably thinking now, can I really have them live with that because of the impacts that's being talked about? Not an easy conversation, but certainly a lot of information.
So can we talk about potential other revenue sources?
And that's our next step. As soon as Matt is basically feels like we've got everything on the table. And let's not forget what he just last comment. He may have an argument and he may come in and ask you, should we put in essence, a restriction on that $10 a month water bill increase and simply take that 3 years off, knowing perfectly well, we got possibly $120 million bill coming at us. Would it be best just to continue with that as an avenue by which we can generate more revenue? Amber says there's $1 million we stack, but we may need to have more than that in order for us to be able to deal with all of the infrastructural changes that ultimately we're going to have, particularly when running a 50-year. I think a life expectancy of the PVC is about 50 years. Unless you live in the neighborhood where the Pauls live, in which case the acid is just eating that stuff up.
Well, that's ductile.
Yeah, it's ductile. It's not PVC.
Okay, well, PVC will last 50 years, and maybe we ought to change it out and make PVC out of it. Okay, we okay with all that?
Yep.
Everybody okay with all that? Not easy, but this is why we're having this conversation.
Let's talk solutions.
So let's talk about options, okay? And I'm just gonna throw you read some stuff. Joe has some ideas too. Brian has some ideas. Let me just, I put in the packet, I just want to basically you understand the reality. Please don't lose sight of the fact is today, and I'm waiting now, Matt, we think in June or maybe July, the Utah Taxpayers Association will post their 24 document. And I would say all indication is Roy will also come up and probably show to be in the top 5 in the state of the best managed, okay, cities, okay, that handles taxpayers' funds. We certainly were in 2022. We certainly were in 2023. And you see from those data, we're actually getting better. I wouldn't be surprised, in fact, if 2024, when the numbers come out, we're also doing really well. Now, there's some trade-offs with that, but you need to see the data. We've talked for months now about where we see the flat line on revenue. We've left you no doubt in your mind what's happening in terms of our revenue streams. And the details are there. If you read through the information, we provided you the population numbers. There were just some things I wanted to make sure you've seen up front, so you have this all in front of you. And then we wanted to start thinking about what else can we do. And I'm saying to you right now is that I'm not sure what else can be done, but we're going to throw some ideas at you. And you need to be thinking if these are viable ideas you'd like to consider. And certainly I would ask Matt, department heads, if these don't make sense, if you see risk in this, then throw it back. Make sure we understand whether these things, these are off the table. These are certainly out of the box. We're just saying to you is that are there things out there that we might consider in terms of that process? So let me throw one. I'll throw a couple of these and then you can make comments. And I know that both Joe and Brian also have those, but let's have it for the record. In 2016, the city was established deputy positions. Okay, I was there. I was a city council member when the decision was made. And we started putting a motion, okay, that we were going to have deputies. Today, Brandon basically is now the public works director. There was at least the idea that I put on the table was to suggest is, could we as an organization hold off from Brandon filling his deputy public works director position and save roughly about $140,000 a year? That's a recommendation, okay? Now, it's on the table. Brandon, you're the director. If you see that's good, you can live with, great. If you say, hey, I've got some real problems with that, no problem. This is certainly an open conversation. Certainly interested to know what you think about that.
So as far as terms of what it'll save the money, from what I gather is 80% of it's funded out of enterprise funds.
Mhm.
So I think it can affect the general fund. I think that's what we're all trying to figure out is the general fund, maybe 30,000 a year. And I think 30,000 a year is a definite benefit. Like you said, between when Ross was here, there's lots of obviously the day-to-day operations that we gotta handle at Public Works, as well as we do have 7 grants, soon to be hopefully 8 grants that we have to oversee and manage. Lots of them grants range from anywhere from $300,000 upwards to $5 million. So there's lots of money and there's always new grants that we try to stay up on top of. Dealing with Wasatch Civil on working through them grants and making sure we can secure as much money as we need on those. And then also in Public Works, we have 9 different budgets. Those budgets all total over $20 million. And we have to oversee them as well. And I feel like those are some big price tags to cut on a position. I feel like it's a real important position just so we don't have anything slip under the rug, especially those grants are a big deal,
Okay.
and spending the money wisely.
2 ideas on the table. One would be should we basically consider not filling it, not abolishing it, just not fill it for a pause of time? But I'm sensing from Brandon's point was simply says that person, which we don't question the fact they provide value. It's more the fact is that there's a targeted requirement within the city right now, focus those people on the things that he talked about. So think about that, okay? These are just ideas for brainstorming. Okay, talk about Parks and Rec. Recommendation is consider consolidating. This one will be a good one for you, Michelle. Consolidate the Public Works offices and the Parks and Recreation offices in the same facility on 5525 South. Then lease the existing Parks and Rec building to a company or sell it to the Roy City RDA board to be used for commercial sales tax and property tax establishment. This is pretty bold, okay? Certainly it's going a little completely different than where we basically went, but the intent would be is to revitalize that property to generate revenue. Michelle, you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I know the document says there's 9 current employees, but I would say that the department and that facility houses much more than that.
Okay.
During the summertime, we have at least 15 to 20 part-time parks employees. Recreation has 30 to 50 at any time, part-time employees. In addition, that building houses a lot of storage of all of the recreation equipment, houses meeting rooms for coaches meetings and staff training, both for parks and rec and aquatics. And all of the parks equipment. I'm not sure that Brandon really wants to share his space with all the mowers and or the council's appetite to construct on some type of space over there for that type of equipment.
Sounds like she has the space that she basically needs, the extra space, particularly from the summer. Okay, the 2024-25 budget proposes Roy Day budget at $124,000, in which case $32,900 is an overtime. Recommendation of them is cut the budget by 50% and require 25% of the help to be volunteers. Who wants to take a shot at that one?
I think volunteers are good if they're not doing anything where they're driving any equipment or gonna get, injured. Where we
Okay,
get
serving
sued.
serving
But
food, but I don't know
serving
about
food or
cooking
just-
food.
Just things like that. I think that's about all, or cleaning,
I would strongly just.
But
disagree.
anything else than that, I think if an employee has to stand there to train that volunteer how to do it, they might as well just do it themselves. That's just my opinion. But I think we could use volunteers for like serving food, cleaning, maybe trimming things or just things like that, but not doing any kind of equipment or. I don't know, Michelle, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say a lot of that overtime goes to full-time employees that are helping with some critical jobs like you spoke to, the cooking, the hauling of all the trailers and all of the equipment. Think of the parade. Do you want volunteers out there blocking roads, chief? That overtime is intended for those type of positions. The volunteers are wonderful and I think they were a great addition for the salmon bake. I would really like to be able to live in Roy Days a little bit longer. It has been scaled back at a new location. We're starting to fill out how all of that goes.
Your 50% cut, are you talking of the entire budget or the overtime budget?
Well, remember, Roy Days is not a 1 or 2 day event. Roy Days virtually is a week-long event. We've got so many activities moving in so many directions. We have seen our employees basically out in parks at the middle of the night because we've got a movie we're showing. We see a lot of that. There's a significant investment taking place in Roy Days.
I think we cut it to a Friday evening and a Saturday.
We didn't even do Friday evening last year, did we?
That's when the Salmon was,
Oh, yeah,
and the
Saturday.
movie in the
Movie
park.
in the
Had
park.
the park thing Saturday, and that saved a lot.
So the salmon bake and the movie in the park on Friday, it got canceled, or the movie got canceled early because of the wind.
Weather.
And then we have the events all day Saturday,
Mhm.
and there are the ancillary events leading up
Leading up.
to
And then
the-
fireworks.
And the fireworks, they don't, was that donated, the fireworks? Oh, okay.
We pay for
I'll
them.
give you a patrol car and reflective vest.
Done.
The intent, so we don't.
Can I just make myself a throw card?
There's a balancing act in terms of about this big event, and by the way, it's a big event, Roy.
Right.
The issue comes down to, do we basically raise taxes? Or do we basically keep people employed? Because what we don't want to do is find ourselves in a situation where we basically don't have the money to pay for all of this. And so you look at the low hanging fruit where you can basically make some adjustments. My comment would be, instead of a week-long event, should it be just a day event or a 2-day event? Strictly. But these are the kind of conversations. Today, for the 2024, or excuse me, the 2025 budget, we're talking about $124,000 for next year's Roy Days. We still can adjust that if we want to save some money.
Well, how much does it cost to throw the movie in the park? Is that a big cost? I mean, I don't think if you did away with that, it's a big deal because the weather hasn't been canceled like last couple of years, rain and then wind.
Yeah, I mean,
You'd have the salmon bake.
I don't have the exact numbers, but I would say $3,000 to put on the movie, not including the overtime or staffing that may stay there. You know, the police chief has a couple of his
That'd be
guys
the
out
first
there
thing I
also.
would cut. And I would cut all the freebies to the salmon bake.
Freebies.
We hand out a lot of free tickets to the salmon bake.
Oh.
You wanna eat, you're gonna pay.
Well,
And we can look
I'm not
at
gonna eat,
increasing the
so
Cost of the
I don't
salmon
eat
bake
fish.
to cover the actual cost of the event.
Right. Are we increasing?
15, we are not currently.
And so does it make money or is it in the hole? It's always in the red.
But I mean, there's quite a few outside of council and stuff like that that we give tickets to.
Yeah.
That, I mean, we're giving a freebie, but we're saying we can't afford to run the event, so let's quit giving freebies.
So you were saying cutting back also on like the Easter egg hunt or the trunk or treat thing, doesn't Waste Management pay for the Easter egg hunt?
And there's a sponsorship that Waste Management typically does for the Easter egg hunt. Our budget also supplements some of that to
for the employees.
get the employees and then the additional items that would be there. And so that, and then would reduce the amount of,
The vendor booths, okay,
Yeah.
where's all that money go to?
Yeah,
How many vendor booths are we talking? What do we get total vendor booths? And doesn't that go to Roy High?
Not all of it, most of it goes to Roy High.
Yeah.
So Roy High, traditionally, it used to be the band, then it moved over to the athletics program.
Mhm.
But they administer the vendor booths, that's correct. And so all proceeds are given to Roy High.
How many?
So,
Even on the food trucks,
Yeah.
so,
we keep a small
have to
stipend,
provide
but
the
the bulk of
employees.
it goes over to.
so we provide all the employees, we
Employees,
do
we
all
give
of the
them a-
basic infrastructure set up. But all of the revenue, for the most part, goes to Roy High.
maybe we get a cut back out of that to help fund the employees, not take it all, but.
I'm just saying, Jim,
He's the one that does it all and doesn't sleep
not
for
the
like
only one
36
there.
hours. I know.
I see, Chief, you've had a number of officers there, okay, that have to be on duty to support that.
And not having it 2 days really is cut back on, and it was better at George Wallen too.
Well, we haven't had them, we haven't had to have them out as many days. We're not having to patrol 2 different parks simultaneously
Yeah.
now.
So what else could be, you got away with you did away with BMX, so what else, if we did away with the movie? Is there anything else that? I mean, obviously they like performance of the stage and I mean, is that something, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot going on Roy
Yeah.
Days.
I mean, it's the next biggest thing to the Weaver County Fair, Roy Days.
It is. But what I'm saying is that I just want to make sure our employees are getting paid.
Right.
Let me offer this thought. If you think it's worthy of a conversation, council, they're still meeting. This whole Roy Day event that's being put together is still discussing.
Mhm.
You can certainly out of this discussion simply says, hey, let's get some details and look to see if there's ways they can do that. If 50% is too bold, then cut it 20%.
Well, I know doing away with getting brand new shirts and a new theme shirt and new hat and a new golf shirt and stuff every year. They did away with that. And that was a waste.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so they're just gonna do the one generic shirt last year and, or maybe even do t-shirts, but not a new golf shirt and a new hat and all that stuff that went on for years. That should save some money right there too.
Do you want the Roy Days committee, and who's on that, by the way?
Brian and I.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna make a comment. Her Roy Days budget is so trim. You wanna start taking $1,000 here, $1,000 there.
Yeah.
Like, that's when you gotta decide, Kate, like I say, if you're looking for the big money, go take away the fireworks.
Yeah, that's like
Something to
30
that point,
grand.
'cause I think her budget is so trim that yeah.
Well, it's like-
How much is the firework?
30 grand is, I think, the last bill I heard.
25,000.
25?
So maybe try to find a sponsor to sponsor it or?
We do have a sponsor, Parsons actually sponsors it at $10,000.
So we're still coming up 15. Yeah.
Do they want to up at
So
5?
maybe if we got Geneva Rock to sponsor $10,000, I mean, I'll ask them.
Yeah.
They would
Um,
help, that would pave $20,000 for the fireworks.
It's $124,000 budget. Is there a way by which we can carve it? That's the question on the moment. I can't get into the details, to be honest with you. But certainly, those who are on the committee could look at that if you find there are ways by which we can basically support that.
Well, I think that's what Michelle did this last, she took out the things that weren't important, took out the things that I think she knew she could cut off the bat, but
So you're saying 124 is probably as lean as we're
I
gonna get?
think that is so lean.
Unless we
Like,
get a
what?
sponsor to help with fireworks.
fully support no fireworks.
The other one would be is that the Roy City has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars for new office equipment, furniture, exercise equipment, remodeling of bathrooms. Recommend no renovation. At least for another year.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah, as the guy that has to implement it, yeah, Brandon's like, sold, done. I see what you did there, Brandon.
Yeah, don't even know where anything needs to be renovated, so.
Well,
Fire
Well, there's
station,
plenty.
Fires.
Plenty.
Yeah,
There's plenty.
if when he flushes the toilet, it doesn't hit North Davis sewer, there's a problem.
Well, I know
We
you did
can
the
get
one
Porta John.
renovation there.
he told me that got
The
fixed.
Parking lot.
Hopefully it's fixed now.
The Facebook one's pretty bad.
I don't step into another Porta John again in my life. I'll be
Okay.
happy.
I'm happy to give you a tour.
So what about, no, I don't need that. What about renovation outside of the fire station? These are hard conversations
Yeah.
because someone says, man, I need a new chair. Can you sit on the old chair for at least another year?
Or sit on the poor engine stuff.
Right?
Let's,
I mean,
That takes
I mean,
too
let's move
long.
to the big things,
no,
man.
no, I gotta get through the small things because the big things, I'm telling you, and Joe, you know this, because we're gonna really get deep in this. These are gonna be hard things. If we talk about, well, okay, let's jump into them, okay? I'll tell you, and Brody, you and I and Matt have talked about it. I've got to get the planning commission to basically get us the UTA recommendations from the planners.
We've talked about that. It's scheduled to be talked about in June, as fast as they can get through with this.
Okay. Interesting enough, that's 6 months after we received the changes. We just gotta move that faster if we can, because these kinds of things are impacting our ability to build. Right now, I pointed out three spaces that are sitting along Midland Drive, in all practical purposes in that illustration, you see it's dead space. One owned by a company, one owned by Roy City, the other one owned by UDOT, okay? You've got roughly,
Get something.
man, I think you got almost 2 acres there.
On crime.
Should we start thinking about going ahead and do something with that? Contact all the principal players, see if there's something collectively to do to try to put something at that
Is
location.
one of them a retention basin?
Yes.
So
I think one of the ways
where do you put it?
consider, Mayor, with stuff like that as rezones, because when we take development in there, to say that we're gonna put a house on some of that property is not gonna do much of anything. But if you wanted to enclose a detention basin, there's contractors out there that will do that, take it over. And then take over the land and the maintenance of that, so you'd actually get the property tax and you'd actually not have to maintain it anymore. So I think there's a lot of value in those types of ideas, but the first thing is we would have to really consider rezoning that area.
Any rezone has to go through the planning commission, come back to city council for a final recommendation. We okay with at least pursuing that?
Definitely.
Okay.
So
Next one deals with the property sitting at the train station. Now, if you remember under the stationary plan, the idea was this particular property was agreed to go put townhouses at it. But the real long-range plan was, and Brandon, you'll have to help us with this, was actually use that property to build a tank. There's some provision somewhere out there that basically says we have to have another water tank in order to supply the water.
but that's enterprise fund, so that's not general budget fund.
No, but what is limiting us is that here you've got this magnificent stationary plan that's gonna be unfolding. And now we're gonna build or bury a water tank in the middle of
So
it.
can I propose my first thing while you're talking about that? What if we take that 1.6 acres and get it out of enterprise fund by taking the parking lot of Parks and Rec building as a reserve for a potential another water tank? So we move the enterprise fund from the train station over to the Parks and Rec parking lot for a second tank, which there's already a tank right there anyway. And then give that property to Roy City to
Develop.
dangle a carrot to get it developed.
We also talked about if we could reach out to Hillfield and see if we could lease property as well up on the Hillfield property and put a second tank there. So,
Are we mandated to have a second tank?
so right now we
Do
need
have
it, but with future development, so we have to have so many water gallons of storage per residential connection.
to
So
their-
right now we're fine.
Right,
But
for
future
Roy, but it's
development-
any of the build out that we're doing in West Haven because we have the water
not
agreement.
us
Not us specifically, but more West Haven.
No, but
build out
if we put any kind of a housing development at the train station or housing development at up on 1900, you're gonna up your numbers.
So, yeah, I mean, that's, as long as we can find it, we have enough connectivity throughout the city that we can.
I can look at Hill Air Force Base
Or 48, but
can you
that's,
park vehicles on a tank if it's underground?
yeah, I'm sure they play baseball on one of Clearfield.
See, you won't lose your parking. We'll just,
Boom, we got you.
we'll just put a water tank under it
So,
and then you can keep your bill.
Let's see, council, are you okay with us pursuing to look at options here? Because certainly I will tell you, the Central Weber Water Basin, whoever's out there in West Haven that runs their water, has two tanks on the Ogden Airport. Ogden Airport needs to move those, and they're gonna move them north on the airport property. Maybe what we could do, if you need something that's high elevation sitting off the side, maybe we can see if we can get another piece of property to put our tank up there. Certainly the one at Hill might be an option, but I think our tank was there before Hill kind of took in that man's two area up there, so we can have a fence around our property up there, our tank. A little more
I mean,
difficult
looking
with
at
that.
things, if we can quickly get it out of an enterprise fund and get that to where Roy City can put it on the market. I'd go one further, but I don't want to deplete too many sources and I want to talk about one for that one further, so.
Well, if we're okay with that, then let us begin the conversation. Certainly, Brody, you'd be part of that. Let's look at the options. That one maybe will be something we might be able to do if we can find another source, but listen to me, okay? I'm hard pressed to basically believe that Roy City has an obligation to use Roy City property to build another tank so West Haven has more water.
So, yeah,
What West Haven do is to find their own space and build their own tank.
It's not my fault they're on flat ground.
and how much does that cost to put a new water tank in?
That was a sinister laugh, Brandon.
yeah, I would say prior to before, I would guess anywhere from 7 to 10 million probably.
We got some, we'll look at options.
Yeah,
But at least we can secure the property.
yeah, we have a location.
And get viable, buildable property back in the hands of the city that can work with a developer to get that going.
So we can talk to the engineers to say what is reasonable to have a second.
Let's see if we can do it. Okay, so we'll take an action from this meeting to do that. Joe, you've read this too. Let's talk about the property on 4800.
So Royce City has, on 4,800, I don't know how many exact acres.
It's almost
1.8, 1.6, I remember, right?
1.6 acres of property that sets down below 4,000 west. It was slated somewhere in a future use as a potential park. There's a little parking lot there. We've never developed it. There was talk about making a park along the slough. To me, that's prime buildable real estate. It's right in the middle of housing in that. That could put real money real quick back in our pocket. If the RDA buys that property at market value from the city, that puts the money in our pocket before this budget hits potentially. I mean, 1.6 acres at 300,000 an acre, you could potentially have $500,000-600,000. That would offset your cost of living increase right there. So then we start whittling out the next 500,000. So I would say if we can get 3 nods from council members, let the RDA buy that right now.
Want us to take this on?
So that
Council?
little piece of property where that little parking lot is right there?
Yeah.
Isn't there a canal or something?
There's a
there?
canal.
There is.
But it goes back deep.
It would probably, and this is gonna be a dirty word, and I generally don't support these, but it would probably be higher density. You'd have to do it on a building agreement,
Pencil.
a construction agreement. But I've been looking around at different higher density housing units, and there's some pretty nice looking ones out there on the market that you could put in there and make it work. I don't know.
Well, how much is it? 1.6 acres?
I think
Ish.
that- I think
How
that's
much
what-
was that one down on 6,000 that?
times 5.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is basically you take, even approach the guy, see if he's still willing, and let's do something over on 4,800. He was raring and ready to go, and then he pulled back on the reins, but that's what I say, you could take the money
Should've
from,
done the 15 on there. We
Yes.
should have approved the 15 on there.
but
That's just-
maybe
we go back
we
to-
could do that on this.
What's that property right above the Grandview Ogden Clinic? When I had to go there today and there's all that property.
They own
They
that.
own that, yeah.
At one time, when I was on the planning commission, they talked about putting a pharmacy there.
Expanding.
So
for
the
future expansion.
Grandview Clinic owns that, the Ogden Clinic owns that.
Yeah.
That's
But
it.
this would be, these lots are smaller. They're not as big as the lots over on 6,000.
Yeah.
So you could do a higher density unit in there and be in pretty good shape. But if the RDA buys it from the city at market value, we have $500,000 to $600,000 right now off to sell that. That covers your cost of living
So
and maybe a little
what
more.
about the citizens? They're all mad at when we put any kind of high density stuff in there.
So we're up
That's
against
the question. Do
Yeah.
they want to pay a lot more money in property taxes at
or
35%, or
1,000.
do you want a few more houses in your backyard?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is, we're only dealing with half of the houses that like we were in the other development too, because we've got the canal that runs on the one side of the property. So.
But I
again,
don't know
Yeah.
that the 1.6 includes the canal, because the canal's not ours.
No, but I'm just saying there's already a barrier, there's already a natural barrier that we don't, there's already that there between the other houses.
And let them develop it into a
Yeah.
park if they want to.
Council, you okay with us pursuing this idea? I think there's a lot of work here.
Fox Glen. Or the, yeah,
No, it's.
I used to live on 3950 and we walked to Fox Glen. Or across 4,800, you have the follow the slough into the
The
pond.
Yeah.
You have 2 parks really close.
Sorry, Michelle, we're taking more of your park property.
Council, here's the question. Are you okay with us going ahead and looking at this as a possible? We have to flush this out, so we have to work hard and fast. We want to do that between the budget cycle. Are you willing to allow us to go ahead and look at this as a possibility?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's
I mean,
Okay.
genius.
it's not a done deal. I mean, they would.
It's not
Sure.
that deal until.
No, but the
Fine.
RDA can tie it up.
Yep.
And work with the developer over the summer. The city can get general fund money as soon as
Yeah.
Brody can get an
As long as
appraisal.
the RDA would, thinks it's a deal that they want to buy it, right?
I know most of the RDA
I
board
have to
members.
call-
Well, I'm not gonna say anything.
Oh, and so it doesn't have, Stan has to come in and do anything, but he's already.
The RDA board has the flexibility to buy its property if they want.
Yes.
We'll probably just have to have an RDA board meeting, the first of
June or after we get the
The planning
tax rate.
commission still has to basically work this, okay, to figure out what to do and then take the public input. And the city council would have to approve whatever the planning commission comes back with.
Well, I don't know that it has to go to the planning commission because you don't have to zone it right now.
Yeah.
It depends on if it's
So
zoned.
you have to have it
I
zoned.
quit our one up- our
That could be done after it's sold.
No, if the
Depends on the
transaction
price you
from the
want,
RDA
so
to
this-
that, it all can happen fast.
Yeah.
It's the long-term commitment to put something on it, may have to have. a
But if you do a construction agreement like we did next to Bridge Charter School, you don't have to rezone it.
Well, the development agreement can, if you can find somebody who wants to come on a development agreement to do that.
That's, I would reach out.
Doesn't have to be bought for an affordable housing purpose by the RDA.
That's higher density is.
Yeah, so we,
affordable.
oh yeah, we'd have to zone it. Well, will we have to zone it high density?
You don't
before
have to
we sell
zone it, you just have to do a development agreement.
We develop an agreement.
But if you put it in the RDA, there's some rules the RDA has to follow. But the RDA, once it's appraised, once the board votes on it, can buy it right then. I mean, I know that puts a lot on Brody. Good thing you got big shoulders, but if I can help, I will.
And it's, yeah,
Okay, man, Brody, I think we got an agreement to go ahead and look at this deep, and we need to spend some time fleshing this part out. Last one, and then we'll get into some others. If you look at the future land use map, first thing is make sure you understand what's proposed between 2026 and 2027. UDOT is still planning to widen 3500 up Midland, up to where the 4 lanes is on Midland. That's gonna pass in front of this property. The future land use map basically shows this to be a commercial property on that illustration I showed you. But if you look at it on the east side of that, there's a big park proposed. Now, considering that this is all commercial, would you consider allowing the planning commission to take another peek at this future land use map and come back to the city council with the idea that maybe not making a park and opening that whole piece of property open for pure commercial?
I'm good with it.
It's gonna generate more opportunities.
I think we just take the best care of the parks we have and be happy. We got the right
Some of
person to
best
do it.
Parks around.
And we do have a lot of green space. We.
We
I
just
think
have to
Kansas
hire
City has
more
done really
employees,
well
take
with
care of
their
that
green
part, and more
space.
fertilizer and more lawnmowers, so.
So I need 3 nods. You okay with us taking a peek at this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Will's wrong.
Brian, you had some ideas? You want to throw them on the table?
No, not now. No, I'm kidding. I have a couple. They're minimal, I think, but maybe not. First of all, the beautification. The budget, it looked like it jumped about $10,000.
Okay.
It went from 5 to 15,000. What are we buying for an extra 10 grand? A lot of beauty?
So the beautification budget actually was changed to Arts Council and beautification. And so this last year, the Arts Council's money was basically spread throughout the entire city. Brittany did a complete overhaul of what they spent. They were spending money in Roy Day's legislative budget, parks money. And so we basically put it all together and put it into a committee budget and the legislative department, so we can identify what the committees are actually spending. So the $5,000 in the beautification committee is remaining the same. However, the $10,000 for the Arts Council is what has changed.
So
That's the change, yes.
that's a heck of a jump still.
wasn't there some of that was ramp?
So it came from other places. That was basically what they're spending.
That was
We
getting
didn't add-
spent any differently. It's just now all in one.
All
It's about more
consolidated.
concerts in the park and
It's for concerts in the park, yeah, correct. It's for the Roy Days concerts there. It's for the Roy Days art show. It's for the gingerbread.
They do prizes.
The prizes at the
Yeah.
gingerbread
Poetry
house,
contest. There's a couple
poetry
things.
contest. That's what it's paying.
All right,
But
next one.
It's actually nothing new.
What about the council's contingency fund?
Mhm.
Can that be reduced by any amount? I mean, we asked the departments to do, what, 7? Can we take 10 from that, 10%,
So
20%?
yes, absolutely. If the council wanted to, that would be absolutely
Hey,
something.
what do you guys think?
Well, that's what I asked her earlier is where we're at, because if we're supposed to be at 18 and we're at 15, we don't have any extra. My second place was just what you were thinking, was to pull money out of the council contingency. If we put $950,000 towards the complex, we ought to be able to put $500,000 towards our employees.
So something with the council contingency as well, is that when we're doing these extra things, last year we did the FFA, that's where the YCC.
Oh, you're
money
saying
came from.
contingency, not rainy day, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So like when Sophie mentioned that in council, what we've been doing historically for the YCC, that's where that money's coming from. So yes, correct, like if we do take some of that money out, there would be.
What's our
It'd be
council
for YCC.
contingency?
It'd be for those programs that
Right.
come in and just.
The FFA said they'll never come back again. That was one time. I talked to them once.
Well.
Well,
if you
until
remember-
next year when their prices go up on their, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
have this one.
Well, that's why Fremont come in, is because when Roy come in and asked us, he says, we're only gonna ask you once. And then Fremont jumped on the bandwagon. Fremont could fund their own.
This is in front of you and you need to be thinking, this is where the legislative contingency funding will draw funds from to pay for these kind of programs that you
Well, I'm
elected.
I mean, it's an honorable program, but if we can't take care of our employees, how can we take care of every handout that comes through the front doors?
I think that's where you have to be.
Yeah, our FFA, they're way involved in that, our high school and our CTE coordinator is on this committee and.
Yeah.
Really, we have a lot of kids from Roy High that are in this, but.
Well, I just listened the other day and interviewed, and selected their officers for next year. And Ingram said he wants to put it back on the Junior Livestock Association to fund it through the auctions.
Well, they should. I mean, they should have never taken it away, so.
But just recognize what's
One more.
involved here.
One
When you
more.
have basically feeding the
You're
football
gonna hate
teams or sports teams, that's in that same budget.
Yeah.
When you have anything that's gonna take place, YCC, certainly these, there may be employee things that are being taken out of that pot. That's where it is. So to Brian's point, if you wanna basically match what the 7.5% that everybody else had to take, then the question would be is, do we basically take the money out of our legislative contingency fund and basically turn that back over to the city to be reprogrammed somewhere else?
I mean, I don't want to sound like an ogre, but I'm all for feeding the sports teams and I love doing it. But if our employees can't feed themselves, then let's look for donations or volunteers or whatever to do some of that stuff.
Disagree, but.
And how much does that cost every time we feed them? About
It probably causes us more in overtime, just employees, more than the actual food.
Seems like the last, yeah, it was about $2,400 a time.
I mean, if that's something that we had to do
$400.
away with for a couple of years or a year or whatever,
We're doing it 2 or 3
we
times.
just would have to tell the high school.
Food that
We
doesn't.
tried to do it 3, but it's been
So it's,
2.
it's $2,400 for the food. That does not include employee wages overtime. Okay.
So Matt and I talked a little bit about this a little while ago, and if we find maybe a cheaper way to go about it, one of the seasons, cause I know we do it 2 or 3 times. If
We
you
do
do
it twice.
pizza, you're not asking all the employees to come in, but right here, everybody would go in and shop.
Scratch a deal with Little Caesar.
So I don't know. I mean, there's ways to cut a little bit, but you're 1,000 here, 1,000 there, but it would cut a little.
And I know the employees love doing that, and I love doing it too, but when we're faced with pretty damn rough times here, I'm worried about the viability of this city right now.
Well, you know, I'll talk to Pusey about it and just tell him, you know.
Well, I don't think it's to Pusey.
I don't
think,
want
yeah,
to
it's
cut it.
us.
Let's see what we can do
But we gotta-
differently.
Yeah, it's us finding cheaper ways to do it.
Yeah.
Can we get pizza donated?
Pizza
Can
and
we take up a
sandwiches,
collection to
take it.
buy pizza?
But then you've also got things like this, where do we say yes to that? Do we say yes to the YCC? Do we say yes to,
It's a long list.
it's a huge list.
So just to, if you were to say yes to YCC and the FFA, you would not have enough money in that account as it stands now.
So what if you did just the YCC?
At the 22, yeah, you would have a, but that's it.
To do the YCC.
Well,
So,
can you
I
go in
think we
and
have to
say
do the
5%
YTC.
off the, instead of 20, what was her ask?
22, so
22,
you
so
do
what if you do 15?
Yeah,
I mean, like, you drop everything down a little bit. I-
What did we do to the YCC last year? Do for them?
So last year, we did not participate. The last time we participated, it was about $8,000.
We wanted 21,500 for our city.
Right.
On the.
And if we didn't do last year and the year before, we only did 8. I mean, I've talked to multiple people and I think you gotta do that one.
Well,
I mean,
I'm not
maybe-
saying you can't. I think it comes down to is that you set the
For our
price.
residents.
You set the price. You simply says, I was here when we did 15,000. I've been here when we said 8,000. So I've seen all versions. Last 2 years, we didn't do anything. So the question you need to ask is that, all right, first, are you willing to do it? I'm sensing 3 of you are saying, yeah, we need to do something. Then we'll put you in a meeting and we'll basically figure out how much that's gonna be. And if it's 8,000 or 5 or 4, that's the number.
10 or
And
15.
just knowing that where Brian Saxon's coming from, if you were to reduce that amount, that's that money to use for that. So if we reduce that 7% or 7.5%, that kind of dictates of what you have to give the YCC.
And then
it
Brian
wouldn't be the full amount.
Yeah, and then Brian said he had one more that I would, okay, yeah. Then I felt.
This one's probably the least popular. Council travel, we just attended Utah League of Cities and Towns, and we sent 7 or 8 people down. Could we just send 2 or 3 and rotate through that conference instead of sending everybody?
What if I just said you pay me for the conference and I'll get my own travel? I just pay for my registration. I'll take care of my own travel.
I'm asking, it's,
He's basically saying this is that we put basically the entire city council down there except one. Matt was there, Brittany was there, who else was there?
I was.
There was us, 4 of us and 5 of us, and then, so we're 7 of us.
Mhm.
He's basically suggesting is that if we're going to do this, then maybe the answer would be is instead of sending 7, we only send 3.
I find great value in it, so I'll pay for my own travel, but if the city just pay for the conference.
Yeah, just the admission.
I mean, the sessions I went to, I learned a lot in.
I learned a lot too, but
I did too.
if someone else takes my place and just comes back and reports what they,
On the flip side, because they do that one down in St. George and they also do one down in Salt Lake.
Correct.
In Salt Lake, I've never found as much
Okay.
value.
There.
That's what I say, if everybody's worried that I'm just going on a vacation, I'll pay for my own travel.
Yeah.
Well, in my car.
I didn't say I was popular. I just.
No, and yeah.
No,
and it-
because we did the same thing with the sewer board. We rotate how many
Rotate.
people goes to the national water environment users conference.
so I went this year, so you could go in my place next year.
And that's whether I'm picked to go or not, we know I have my challenges, but the bottom line is 2 or 3 people could bring that message back to the rest of us.
Well, how much
Basically, I have
would
a
that
6-member
save us?
council with the
How
mayor,
much-
so do half each year.
How much
every
is
other
that
year.
per person that go down there?
I'd have to look it up. I'm not sure.
How much would that save us by only sending 3 instead of 7?
Probably save you a couple of thousand.
Yeah.
That would be fine,
You
but
okay with us?
About 900 a
sticking with that
person.
too?
Yeah.
Yeah, rotate it every other year.
So
I'm fine with.
over 5,000, you would have saved $5,500.
I think 3 votes. We'll take a peek at that and bring it back.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm fine with rotating.
Anybody else?
I have one last one, but Amber might have already blown it out of the water for me. I'd really like to know, and I know it's gonna be hard, to know how much money we have rainy day, what the percentage is. Cause if we're mandated by our legislation to be at 18 and we're already below that, that doesn't do it.
The 18
We're-
mandated between 5 and 35.
But somewhere the council voted on it.
Voted 18.
They did, but it was just, this is what we want to do.
Like to see that.
And we're only, cause I was gonna say, let's drop it to 15, but if you're already telling me that we're there, the honeymoon's over with.
Well, and another thing is originally it was 5 to 25, and then given the current state of the economy, they changed that recommendation. Now it's 5 to 35. So they're saying 18 might not be enough because everything costs more, right?
I was
So
willing to this year go down to 15, but if we're there, then
Well.
I
let me
mean,
make
my
sure.
recommendation would really be between 22 and 25.
How much, we gotta look at two pots, capital improvements, rainy day fund, or the reserve fund. What's the amounts we have in those two pots? Best guess.
We probably have 3-4 million in capital projects.
4 million in capital, $4 million in rainy day, or reserve fund funds. So you got roughly $8 million. When we got really close, okay, and we have been close to 32 since I've been in council, okay, we moved that money. And I can't help but think that probably Amber, she's trying to balance that, probably was moving money to keep us, okay, basically filled on all sides of that, both in capital as well as the rainy day fund. So you got $8 million. $8 million, you're sitting probably close to, if it was all on general fund or that slush fund, you're probably still talking somewhere right around 28, 30 or something. I'm not sure what that number would be. So there's still money in the piggy bank. Just recognize some goes to capital. Some basically is just that discretion, not discretionary, but it's money that we can basically.
my thinking was if we could get 5 to 6 with the sale of this property and pull another couple of thousand, 100,000 out of the rainy day fund, then we get closer to, we can fund everything with, you know, maybe a 15% tax increase, maybe a 12% tax increase.
So, okay, so Joe, and that's where we are at this moment. The question we need to know going forward with you is, as the budget sits right now, it's a proposed property tax increase roughly on 10 to 12% to raise $50,000 to pay for COLA.
500. But take that out of the sale of the property is what I'm.
The problem with the sale of the property is that's one-time money. So when you come around
When it
next
comes
year,
back around
you have
next
to
year,
come up with the 500 plus whatever you want to do again next year.
My goal was to originally not do a tax increase this year and set us up for one next year, but we might have to
It's
do
just
one
gonna
each
be
year.
bigger.
I think
Yeah,
we should do
you're
one.
compounding it if you don't do it.
Okay, well, quick question. What are we getting charged for credit card swipe fees? Roughly guesstimate, how much do we do in credit card transactions? And then roughly we know that it's typically about a 3.5% hit for just the card swipe.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. It's very different depending on what type it is, because utilities get a discount and that is the majority of our fees. Yes. So
I'd just be curious to know what that is.
it was reviewed shortly before I got here. I know Camille went through and met with them and reviewed it and
And it also depends on what type of card. If it's like a reward card, it's a lot more.
Right. American Express, yeah, like I said, it varies. So it depends. But I'd just be curious if we're doing $10 million worth of credit card transactions. I don't know, I'm just throwing a number out at 3.5%. That's $350,000 that we are eating just to process.
there's also regulations on if you can charge that fee on a utility swipe.
Can't.
I'd have to
Can
look
we
it up.
force everybody to express bill pay?
Problem with it is
Legitimately, legally, whatever. you
Well,
want.
and on the flip side too, anybody want to guess, there's 8,500 people that still receive a paper bill. And that itself costs us 67 cents per bill to mail out. So you're looking at like 90 grand in just postal that
Well,
we're
that's what I'm saying. If we
Yeah.
can push everybody to express bill pay.
paperless. Or if you still want it, then there's going to be some type of surcharge,
fee or
$1.
Because if you start charging the fee on each service, the problem is it becomes, you have to treat everybody the same. So you have somebody with a building permit that's got, $15,000 and somebody with, like, it's hard to get it the same for everybody. It's almost better just to raise the fees to cover those charges rather than making sure you're treating everybody equal.
And the last time we reviewed it, I mean, this was probably 7 years ago or so, there was some type of law that stated that you could only do it over a certain threshold. So what certain cities were doing is saying, if you were gonna come in and buy a building permit, you're not gonna put that on a credit card. Or if you're gonna come in and pay for, we do have water bills that are in the thousands of, not $10,000 when you're talking about some of the trailer parks and stuff that they were putting on reward credit cards. They're saying you could charge charges on those, but not like the typical, you know, anything under, I think, and back then, I think it was $1,000 if I remember correctly, but that was like
Make
7
that
years
roll. If
ago.
it's anything over $1,000, you charge them a 3.5% surcharge. I mean, I know most, there's so many companies starting to do that now.
How many car washes?
I'm waiting for the state to come out and do that.
Yeah.
Is the amount of money they're spending in credit card
The
transactions.
biggest checks we were getting on building permits, we just don't take credit cards for them.
Yeah.
They have to bring in a check, so we're not swiping it on those large
Yeah,
amounts, it's
when
all the
that-
small ones.
Yeah, when we reviewed it, that was ultimately the council's decision is to say we won't accept it. The only exception right now is I think certain utility accounts that are in excess.
Okay, so let's
We
pull up,
get
we're sitting
dry.
close to 9:30. I think we got some good information. Here's the next question, okay? Do we need a part 2 to this meeting? To finish this up so we can be ready for the 3rd Tuesday in June to get your decision?
After we get more info, because it's really depends on if we sell that property or not.
Well, that part of it's one part. Certainly that will happen as part of an RDA board, and that should happen if it's gonna happen sometime in June, if we're gonna do that prior to this. But there's work that has to be done to make that work. Go
Can
ahead.
I also walk you through some more steps in the process? Yeah. If you decide you want to go through truth and taxation, it doesn't mean that you are deciding, yes, we want one, no, we don't. That gives us actually until the end of August to make these final decisions. But
I vote for
that-
the truth and taxation every dang year.
Thank you.
So many cities I'm talking to are doing that.
And it doesn't always have to be one, but if we go through the process every year, it is very beneficial. The other thing is on that meeting in June, you have to decide the most you are willing to do because you can't ever go above that in August. So you could say 100%, you know, and then only actually adopted 10 to 20. But you want to figure out that highest threshold you're willing to go because that's what that's what you decide in the June meeting is, yes, we want to go through the process and this is the highest amount we want to go. Those are the two things you have to decide.
And that comes down to the discussion that says, I got $1.5 million of what we see of what you were talked about, informed about in terms of what's behind. And so the number is it 500,000? Is it 0? Is it 500,000? Is it 1.5 million? We're gonna have to flush that piece out of this conversation. What part did you like? What part you need? I would strongly recommend, if you don't mind, take your charts, send that to the council so they can see that. Maybe we can flush that. But I just need to know, do you want to have one more meeting to sit down in a workshop to flush this last piece? We'll gather as much information as we can before you step in to set that limit, assuming you're going to establish a limit on a truth and taxation decision.
The 7.5% was how much?
It was
550,000.
My goal, this might be not popular, my goal is cost of living and the 7.5% cut.
Well,
If
that's,
we can,
it's $1 million.
well, whatever we can get out of the property
Property
down
value.
yonder, then the rest
That's-
comes out of a tax increase.
I think then we need to look at softening that some with the rainy day fund. Take out 100,000 or 200 or 250 and use that to help soften this blow. I don't want to go knock on my neighbor's door and tell him it'll be $220.
The dilemma, if you pull it from the rainy day fund, is we have to go back and do that year after year
Yeah,
after
We're just
year.
kicking the can till next year.
Yeah.
I don't think we should take any money out of there.
The other
No.
Thing is, keep in mind, we just took a big chunk out of it, because
Correct.
even when you talk about percentages, I'm not as concerned about the percent. I want it to stay approximately the same. So
Correct.
anytime you say we're gonna use this, the next year you have to replenish it. So if we just took $950,000 out, we need to replenish it, not take more out.
If
I
we're
mean, I'd
gonna-
really like to do a 12% tax increase and get the rest of the other to get to the million, 1.05
Whatever.
million from the sale of that property.
And that wouldn't take anything from the current balance. We would be even, so.
Correct.
And one of the, so like, let's say we work with both assumptions of saying we're gonna take some out of the rainy day fund. It's $250,000. If we're going to take the remaining $500,000 out of the sale of a, you know, of a piece of property.
Right.
That's $750,000 that next year
have
we
to
will be
account
going into a budget with a $750,000 deficit.
Right.
Period.
I mean, yeah,
You'd
that's,
have to sell more property where you'd have to have $250,000 more in the rainy day fund. If
Okay, so-
not, we'll have the same dilemma next year, but it will be, $750,000 plus anything that happens in the economy.
Well, but correct me if I'm wrong, help me with this number. We're talking about $500,000 for COLA. We're not talking about merit. You're absorbing the merit based on the existing. But we're going to also have to do a merit COLA next year. So the number we need to come up with is $1 million of new money.
Yes.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
So somewhere in the process, we gotta find $1 million more revenue than we got today.
One point
Or
five
for
million.
just to stay.
Well, that, yeah, no,
Well,
that's.
we have two 1.6 acre properties. The one, I mean, if we wanted to back all the money out of the RDA and not have money to help a development, you could buy both sets of properties at enough money to 100% cover this.
Okay,
And
so
let's say,
But
to
again,
heck, to heck with the RDA.
but the dilemma
But
is.
the difference is, hold on.
Go, go,
The
go.
difference is, even though you're depleting the RDA money to buy that, once you turn around and flip that, the RDA's, so then let's just sell both pieces of, let's let the RDA buy both pieces of property.
The dilemma though is that is only a one-time cash
It
infusion.
is, but we're trying to get through this year. Next year's
yeah.
another year.
so hold on. when
We
we're-
know we're going to have to raise,
Well,
it's a fact of reality.
Every year.
Every
At some
year.
point, we're gonna have to raise property taxes. If we can buy time this year, you're gonna have to do it next year.
I just think we should raise them every year, at least 10 or 12%. I mean, that's
Agreed.
only 40 something dollars a year. I mean, that's.
20 cents a day, 20 freaking cents a day.
I mean, you just don't go to Maverick 2 times a week.
You can't
And-
even keep food in the blessing box
Everything
because
goes
somebody
up.
comes
And how
by
we keep
and
our
cleans it
employees
out.
And our
I
cops
got
and our.
multi-generational families that live up the street from me. And they've had to come and bond together in order to even pay for their home. I just think that a tax increase every year says, we don't know how to manage our own wallet.
That's just
That
inflation.
is-
though.
Market
is
says
inflation.
inflation's going up.
Goes up. The
I,
cost-
I agree to a degree, but it's costing more and more every year to run the city. And we're not, you have, all people know, Brian, you worked your butt off for 4 years to bring businesses here. How much money did that bring in? I was a part of it. We're working our butt off right now. Nobody wants to come to Roy. That's the damn reality. We're not increasing through sales tax revenue.
Yeah, but you're not gonna increase it by raising property taxes on both residents and commercial.
know,
They're
we
gonna
gotta
go, you know
balance.
what?
We
We're
gotta
not gonna
balance.
go to Roy.
Well, but here's the thing is when you look at the tax rates of all the different municipalities across the entirety of Utah, you can't go to any other municipalities and have a lower tax rate. The tax burden is one of the lowest. We're one in the top 5 for the lowest
We're in the
tax
top
burden.
3 right now.
Top 3. We're probably going to be number 2 once Clinton, our neighbor city, goes through and increases their budget by 25%. They're raising their taxes by 25%.
Let the RDA buy both properties. We don't have any damn developers that want to come right now anyway, so we've got $2 million sitting in the bank. Let's use it.
Okay, really quick question on that. If we do spend the money on that RDA, or we buy that, when we get the money back from that, does it go back into the RDA
Yes.
or
Yep.
does it?
But within the
does.
next year or two, you're gonna have some people that want to do some development that are gonna require some RDA money. So we have to do it strategically to buy the property now with the RDA money and as quickly as possible, get it back on the market.
Well, then let me ask you this, council. There's still some good questions that need to be answered, right? And you need to feel comfortable whether or not we're gonna basically drop at 10%, at 20%, how we're gonna negotiate selling property to make this work so we don't burden our residents. At the same time, make sure that we provide at least an opportunity to meet the needs of the city, particularly the needs of the city employees. I'd strongly recommend we try to factor in one more discussion. That once we flush all this out, Matt and I and Brody can work this out, come back to you and says, okay, here's everything we talked about. Here's where we are. Let's tweak this. And then I think you'll have enough of a decision, enough information to make a decision. So on the 3rd Tuesday, okay, you can set that ceiling. That says, okay, we're gonna go into truth and taxation if that's your decision. Here's the ceiling. That's what she says she needs. And then we'll flush this whole thing out before we get to August.
I'll be respectful and raise my hand. Can we at least ask for a head nod on buying both properties? so we can get that going,
And
because
have
we
them
can't
back
wait
on it.
till the next meeting.
Well, we certainly can have that conversation, but I'm gonna need the RDA board to finalize that. Here's what I'm gonna do. We will basically put that together for us, okay? But recognize it's the RDA board to finalize that, and you will be the RDA board.
But
making
we have
that
to get
decision.
head nods tonight, otherwise they can't
So
proceed.
we're gonna work it.
We're in the wrong body though to be.
Yeah, we're gonna work that for you. Cause we have to gather that for you and says, this is the roadmap, this is how we're gonna do it, and then we'll have that ready for you when we go to an RDA.
We're okay.
Yeah, we're giving.
We're giving
So we're
permission
giving
for
you
you guys to
direction
flip it
to-
to.
On
RDA.
three head nods.
Is to go basically forward, pull it together, get everything ready. and
I mean, that
ready
2
for
million
it.
is not doing us anything right now, and if there's no developers coming tomorrow, let's buy the property, fund the city, get it back out on the market and see what
Do
happens.
something with it.
Okay.
I'm
not
good
to
with
be the
it.
bad, but what if it doesn't sell? What if it doesn't?
What if I get hit by a car tomorrow?
Like,
You're
what,
right.
what's the
God, won't you come
ramifications?
save my life?
Hold on, so what is the ramifications of that?
So we can get into that more in the RDA board, right? We need appraisals to know
What it's worth, what fair
I
market
mean, the
value is.
reality is if that money's not there and a developer comes in and we need that money and don't have it, then that's
Well,
also a result.
That might be a bargaining tool though for a developer.
But to your point,
But
first thing is that since the RDA is in fact a separate entity in this, you're dealing with the general fund. If the RDA board elects to go ahead and move that money, makes those purchases, it just now infused anywhere from, I'm gonna guesstimate, 500 to $750,000 into the general fund. By doing so, it allows this body in this meeting to add to the equation an extra 500,000 to $750,000. Now you can say, how do I want to spend that? And if you go to the list and says, I want to do this, this, and this, that's how it'll be spent.
just before we get too cautious, understand this is only lawful for an affordable housing purpose.
Correct.
Which
Yep.
we know from history will get all of the neighbors and the churches out and everyone to come
But
scream.
we've said the train station.
4800 is not near the train station. And that's the
No,
biggest
but I will
problem.
recant what I've said because it makes more sense than some of the other ones. I've looked at.
I'm not like, I don't care, but this is the reality is for this to be lawful, that's the only thing you can use it because that is not inside the RDA area.
Those two areas make sense for,
High density.
well, affordable. housing.
Affordable, and it has to be high density in order to be affordable.
We'll come back.
We'll come back.
We'll have one more discussion between now and the decision make in terms of setting the target limit on the property tax. Matt, are you okay with that? Amber, are you okay with that?
I still think we need to call for a truth in taxation.
I think we're to
I'm
that.
sensing three of you are gonna move in that direction.
Yeah.
But just recognize truth and taxations can be controversial. Just make sure you're walking in with all eyes open, make sure you feel comfortable that we move forward.
It's a crappy year, no matter which way you slice it, so you might as well
are
eat
you
as much
wanting to
bread.
meet one more time
I
before
do,
the-
just to make sure you guys
18th?
are okay before we basically
I
get
would-
together.
rather do sooner than later than the 18th.
We'll do it as soon as we can gather as much information to
say
cover
that
everything we
You
can.
need
I'll
time.
speak out of time. I need as much time as can with commercial appraisal. But second of all, we're not gonna know the tax rate until what the 10th,
June 10th.
so we should probably have it on the 11th.
The last time I did an appraisal on property, it took about a month to get back.
We did, yeah, I know the proper.
Well, we don't have them.
Okay,
And
and
it
it will
will-
hard on it, see what we can come up with, come back to the council one more time before we basically ask you in a formal meeting to make a decision on, is it the 18th of June?
18th of June, but we'll hopefully meet on the 11th.
We'll have to have a meeting prior to that to make sure you're all okay with that.
I think I have something on June 11th.
I won't be
Might
here.
not be able to come.
Can you get on the?
I'm gonna be remote too.
I won't, because I know where I'm going to be.
Well, June 11th was more along the lines is because Amber should get the actual numbers back by then, and anytime after that, I think is when we have to do it. We need to make sure we understand it. Okay, anything else?
On the same day.
Are we okay with it? Good discussion. Got a lot of things on the table.
Just another idea, oftentimes when you're doing these budgets, you're doing estimates. And to get best estimates is what we need out of this. If this is a plan with the council going forward, it's not necessarily essential that we sell that land by June 30th to get the money in, because you're creating estimates in basically a budgetary system for all of next year.
And don't we have, because for all intents and purposes, it sounds like we're gonna be going into a truth in taxation. Doesn't that also buy us time until August to final?
We have to at least declare what our highest rate is,
Correct.
20%.
Yeah, you just have
That's
to have
the
the top.
biggest.
I mean,
I don't know.
Dude, you'll be shot in the public square.
Just be careful not to spook the herd.
Exactly.
Because you put the number too high and that word will get out.
You ever seen the running of the bulls?
I know.
You're right in the middle of it.
You're gonna get very popular. Anything else before we leave? Okay, thanks for the conversation. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Joe, do I have
Want
a
me to say the
second?
closing prayer, dude, to bless this man?
I'll second it.
Randy, I got a second. All in favor?
Past my
So-
bedtime, I'm
Sophie,
ready to go.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Get Joe.
Any opposed? Hearing none? We are adjourned. Thank you. Great conversation.